Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is going to be kind of a laid back live stream, I think, because I'm kind of tired today. Just had a lot going on, and there are days I'm just tired. This is one of those. We're about to get to everyone's questions, but I wanted to mention something. A couple streams back, I was trying some different acoustic strings. I had the D'Addario XS strings, and I thought they were a little too smooth, and I switched to the D'Addario XTs, which are also supposed to last a really long time. And I gotta say, those XTs sounded really good for about 3 days, and pretty good for about 2 weeks. And after a month, they were just dead. Not like not intonating or anything, and no chunks out of them or anything. Not dead, like, oh my God, how do you have that on your guitar dead? But they lasted about a week and a half longer than non-coated strings. And I didn't see the point in having coated strings that cost twice as much and don't last much longer. So I'm trying the XS's. I'm going to give them a longer trial run. And I won't know for another 2 weeks, but so just kind of having fun with them. Really liking this Blue Chip TP48. And I was talking to Keith Williams this morning. He was kind enough to send me one of his, which is one of their big jazzes, but in 35. And his custom one has got a rounded tip, so it's basically 3 shoulders of a regular pick. And it's cool too, not so much for acoustic, but I'm liking it on electric, except I can't do a pinch harmonic with this thing for shit. Versus almost any other pointier pick. So I think I'm going to hold on to this as a memento of our friendship, because it means a lot to me that he sent me one. It's a nice gift. It's an honor to have it, but I think I'm going to try their large jazz, maybe in a 40. That's a 35, but with a bit of a tip, because I do like these black ices. They sound quite nice, but the black ices slide around on my fingers so much. I'll be playing them and I'll realize that just from the regular pressure on the string, the pick rotates around in my hand. So it'll start off like this and it'll end up like this or like this, which is not ideal, at least. But anyway, let's get to everyone's amp questions. That's why you're really here. Now, I know that there was a question asked by Johnny Beck at the beginning of the chat, but as I've mentioned before, the stuff asked before the chat officially starts, the order gets jumbled. So I'm going to start with the order there on my screen. But Johnny Beck, know that I recognize that you have been bumped and you will be gotten to shortly, I promise. How are the levels out there? They look good on my end. On my end, they look healthy. Have to hit the gym during the first hour. All right. I'd never try to picture anyone named Hogg dressed as Olivia Newton-John. But have fun. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Memphis is a vibrant city when you know where to go, and I'm working on the tech to make the planned real tour videos much better. I've discovered that Verizon, my provider, has been having issues with their 5G in the parts of Memphis where I want to drive, and that might be the explanation for why I was having so many woes, which I should not be having. I'm only trying to do 720. But they promise. They're supposed to be resolved today by 6:30 p.m. We'll see if that comes true. because I'd like to be able to just stick the phone up on the dash and drive around and talk. And I did find one of my lav mics that works for the phone, so you won't have to hear either the iPhone mic, which is compressed and distorted, or the other app's volume, which just the other app I was using in the second video the other day, or was that yesterday? I don't remember. Anyway, it was just so low in volume, though it sounded okay, just too quiet. Hey, David K. Could I possibly explain how AC and DC can flow through the same wires in an amp without affecting each other? Thanks. Well, they do affect each other. Trying to decide how far down this rabbit hole to go. Like Gringo Pig says, yeah, electromagnetism, it's a big subject. How do magnets work? No one knows. Actually, that's not a joke. No one knows really how magnets work, but electromagnetism is pretty well understood. But for our purposes, I think that what you're describing is how you can have signal, AC signal, on the grid of a tube and have that same AC signal present on the high voltage DC on the plate of that tube, which then goes to the next thing. And you can try not to dumb it down because everyone out here is dumb, but because it's really hard to do this stuff in brief. You can think of the AC comes into the grid of the tube, and because the current present at the grid is amplified into greater current present at the plate, that small voltage, say it's half a volt, can turn into like 50 volts of AC if you were to separate the AC from the DC, and it kind of hitchhikes on the DC, and then you run it through a capacitor, which will not let the DC go past that input, but lets the AC come out. So the incoming DC has the AC piggybacking on it, and it goes to a cap, which has a ground reference, and that network blocks all the DC on this side, but all the AC that was present goes on through. Anything beyond that, really, you need to get a college textbook, and that's almost an entire chapter on all that stuff. A little bit outside the scope of a chat like this. Hopefully that helps, though. Should designs start using separate bias pots for each power tube? I'm worried about how matched tube sets may be in the future due to availability and would like options to balance them. There are many apps out there which have done that to varying degrees of success. And Kevin O'Connor is a big advocate of that, who does the Ultimate Tone books. I have found that when you increase the number of bias pots, you're increasing the complexity, you're increasing the odds of something going wrong, and you're making biasing more difficult. It is really hard to bias two tubes. When you adjust the bias on one, the other bias changes, and it can be kind of disproportionate. Like if you've ever tried to bias a Marshall DSL 100, you know what I'm talking about. So I think the kind of rudimentary bias balance that Fender actually did, as shown in that 1980 Vibrolux that went live this morning, that's actually a pretty good way to do it. You just say, hey, this side gets this much, this side gets this much, and you just adjust the ratio with one pot, and that's your bias balance to either one tube or the other, or one pair of tubes or the other. And then you have a separate, as I added, bias level control. And there are amps that do that. I think, I'm pretty sure, if I'm correct, the Bogner Shiva does that. It's not the only one. So whenever you're talking about bias, the number one goal is for the bias supply to be fail-safe, to be as foolproof as possible, so that no matter what else happens, that bias supply stays constant, and it's always there whenever the tubes are powered on. And so every time you add more components to it, every time you double the parts cost or whatever, or just do anything clever, you have to balance that against is perfect being the opposite of the good. So I think in general, the very simple bias balance circuit that Fender does is better than having individual bias pots per tube. Now you could extrapolate that and do, all right, now I've sent this much bias to this side and this to this side, then have another simple one that says, all right, let me balance each tube in the pair on either side. And that is more complex, but it can be done in such a way as to be, engineered a little bit overkill. You're less likely to have faults. That way you could also start off, say, I'm going to turn the master, push side, pull side balance to noon. And then if you have two tubes on each side and you have a balance pot for each side, you could set that to noon. And then you have a sane starting point. And not those little bitty blue plastic trim pots that Marshall used that there's like one screwdriver in the world that fits it, and every other screwdriver in the world is what people use, and they all chew up the little pot. Mesas use those little blue pots of chewed up screwdriver death a lot as well, and some very expensive amps, and it's just not a high enough quality pot for a bias supply. Hey, Joshua Stevens. Johnny Beck, you had a 6V6, a JJ 6V6 short in your Chinese-built 5F1. You want to know whether the Russian 6PS tubes are any good. It depends on the vendor. Either tube from a good vendor may be quite good. I will say, as I have a larger sample size of tubes than most people do, I'm not, if you get into like production level at Fender or Marshall or even Friedman, that's many more thousands of tubes a year than I experience. But I experience many more hundreds of tubes a year than most players do. I have had good tubes from every vendor, and I've had bad tubes from every vendor. The JJ 6V6S is a very rugged tube. The Russian can be as well. My problem is with the JJ 6V6S for the last several years is very prone to being microphonic in a combo amp, which is a problem. I generally spec out the Electro-Harmonix 6V6 GT for any amps that come in that need them, and I've had fewer failures with those. There's some amps where the plate or screen is are too high because the amp design was flawed, or it needs to be used with a Variac, in which case the JJ is a good option. And some of the Russian tubes, comparable pentodes, are good choices, but you always choose the seller, not the product, especially when it comes to tubes. So if you go to the tube store, Tube Depot, Euro Tubes, etc., you're going to be fine. If you just buy off eBay, good luck to you. Oops, wrong button. Oops, wrong button. I said I was tired, right? Let's see. Hey, PWT. Now we got that Michael Jackson song stuck in my head. All right, trying to apply lessons from my GA15 RV to a GA60 RV. Regarding my statement that all Gibson amps have the same issues, are the 1 ohm cathode resistors, 1.5K grid stops, and 1.5K screen grids okay for EL34s. I would, in general, bump up the grid stoppers on EL34s, just because you want to make sure that you're not going to have any oscillation present. Those tubes are very sensitive to fluctuations of the grid, so there's a reason most EL34 designed amps use like a 5.6K versus a 1.5K. You may get away with a 1.5K. You won't play it and say, "Oh, that sounds awful," but you can have oscillation or very high frequency oddities, clamping behavior. So go to 4.7K to 15K, somewhere in that range. Play around with it, see what sounds good to you. As you increase the value of the grid stopper, you may begin to notice some of the very, very highs roll off a little bit. Beyond that, there's no real downside. So there's a range where the tube is protected and safe. You just kind of dial it in. And I don't know if most people could hear the difference between a 4.7K, a 5.6K, and a 6.8K. But going from 1.5K to a 10K, that's a big enough jump. You might hear some differences. All the other values you have there are fine. Hey, Ken, DB. Scorties, what are my thoughts about Heritage Series Vox AC15-1 TV 50th anniversary? I have no thoughts on that. I don't know whether I've seen that model. I've had the H1 TV, which is the EF86 version, but I don't know if I've had a 50th anniversary called that, or whether they're the same model with confusingly similar names. But in general, avoid the old AC15 and AC30 Heritage TVs with the EF86 channels because the boards were built so poorly. It's a bad PCB board with fake turrets soldered to the bad PCB pads with lead-free solder and not enough of it and no mechanical support. And once those turrets rip out of those pads, they'll take the pad with it, and there's damage to the board. It's really difficult to repair, and all the wire used in it is crappy. So hopefully the 50th anniversary is some other model that I've never encountered, and it's fantastic, in which case my opinion means nothing. But if it's one of the variations on the AC15 H1 TV that I have seen, Danger Will Robinson. Aloha, Victor. Sent to me, TADs or JJs and KT66, please. Pluses, minuses, rather. Thank you. I've avoided using all TAD power tubes unless I hear drastic good news from other techs. I've just had too many failures with the TAD power tubes. 6L6, EL34, and 6V6. I have not tried their KT66s, but I would trust them much less than I can throw them, because I could probably get a pretty good spin on a KT66. I bet I could get some yardage on that, but I wouldn't trust them more than a couple of inches. I would go with the JJ if those were the choices. For KT66s, I actually had very good luck with the JJs, and I've had good luck with Electro-Harmonix. I think Electro-Harmonix KT66. I think that's right. I'm pretty sure that's right. Did I mention tired? You're lucky I'm here. I should be asleep, so I don't nap. If I nap, I feel weird the rest of the day. So it's like I had half a day and then another half a day, and it all kind of blends together, and I'm just getting more tired out of the process. Hey, Quarter. Good afternoon to you too. Should he go for a slightly more expensive 64 Deluxe reverb, or would any of the black panel Deluxe reverbs be fine? Partially interested as a good investment as well as tone. Well, the amps from 64, actually very late 63, through 67, as far as the ones which had black front panels, electronically they're all the same. There's some weird things in 66 where they tended to use black cloth-covered wire instead of yellow. The transformers are the same. All the components on the board are the same. The jacks, the pots, everything is the same. The speakers are the same. The cabinets are the same. Some of them say Fender Electric Company, and some say Fender Musical Instruments Company. That's the dramatic difference. I would say there is a period in 66 and 67 where the chassis was not as pretty, where the chassis kind of looks like it has little striations in it, and the 63 through early 66 nickel-plated chassis is one of the prettiest things I've ever seen in this amp world. It was just a beautiful kind of golden tone to the just a very lustrous silver color, and when the light catches it, you see little glimmers of a golden hue. But electronically, they're all the same. I would find the best sounding, best conditioned Deluxe reverb you can, and not worry about whether it's a pre-CBS or CBS. Someone in the video I have up on the 1980 Vibro Lux reverb that I said the last great year for Fender, which is 80, because after 80, But he said the last great one year for Fender was before CBS bought the company, and that's no disrespect. It's just not true. And someone give me an itemized list of things that are different between a 1964 Super Reverb and a 1965 Super Reverb or a 1966 Super Reverb. Many of the CBS changes did not come until late 68, early 69, with the exception of the AB 165 Bassman, which was a CBS ushered in project. Other than that, a 64 Deluxe Reverb and a 66 Deluxe Reverb are only going to differ as to whether they say Fender Electric Company or Fender Musical Instrument Company. I can't get into the collector's argument. Remember that the collector's market goes crazy, and the amp that costs less now is going to cost a ton later. And then as the boomers go away, what is the value of these amps going to be? Is it going to come down? Is it going to crash? To a large degree, and I say this with all respect, I have many friends who qualify as boomers. I'm not one, so it's not okay to say that. But to a large degree, the vintage guitar and amp market has been a post-World War II generation kind of thing, where they were born in the 40s and the 50s, and some in the early 60s, and out of affection and nostalgia for the music of that time and the instruments used by their heroes. And then they became lawyers or bankers or investment people, and they bought all these things, because they couldn't be Eric Clapton, but they could have the same guitar, and they couldn't be Jimi Hendrix, but they could have the amp. And I understand that, and it's not a criticism. But as that generation goes away, and the nostalgia and affection and reverence for those artifacts is no longer there, will the insane collector's value remain? I think that those amps from that period, specifically Fender, are phenomenal, and the only way to get anything approaching that today is to buy a 2-Rock or have a guy like me make you something. You cannot go to Guitar Center by and large and buy something as well built. Or if you do, and they're there, expect to pay $3,000 and up for it. So I think they intrinsically should have a high value to musicians who need an amplifier. But I think there's a nostalgia factor that has really inflated the price. And I'll leave it to anyone else to argue whether that's good or bad. I'm just saying that it is. Hey, Dustin. Gassed. Good to see you. And Martin, we need you to stick around. Let me go get my bass. I'll do a tribute to Sly as well. It's a tough week for musical greats, but yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on the great Brian Wilson, but I know that I am not the only one, and that's one of the interesting things to me about the truly great songwriters and musicians, is that everyone forms their own friendship with them. These people have no idea that we exist, but many of these people have been our close friends all our lives, and so we all process it our own ways. And in both Brian Wilson's case and in Sly Stone's case, I'm mildly shocked that either of them survived the '70s. But Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on the great Brian Wilson. It is odd to me that he had a bunch of songs about cars and surfboards and stuff and Chuck Berry pastiches, and then just this period of what the hell is that? It's like Stravinsky with Tic Tac Bass and Hal Blaine, and then he just stopped, and the Beach Boys went off and became Mike Love's Corporate Cash Machine. But that brief window of Pet Sounds and Smile, wow. Wow. That's like if Mozart had only ever done. Does that thing have a name? And then did like one symphony, and then went back to in a sandbox. Hey, David Thomas. Of those choices, there's nothing wrong with the Victory Duchess, but I think the Cerebel is a better amp. But both are high quality. They're going to sound slightly different to each other. So see which one works for you. Play each if you can. If not, just get the Sir. You're going to be happy with it. Hey, no, that's not Chopsticks. Chopsticks is bam 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 bam. I'm gonna kill you, if you don't stop. This is just a little thing you'd roll up on the black keys. Does that have a name other than if you don't stop that, I'll fucking kill you as well? Opus 9. If you don't stop that, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Allegrato. Hey, Victor. Question from the end of last week's show. I've been told that most of the tone is in the preamp. How does the output section affect tone? Something like that. Well, I don't think that's true. But I don't think that something else is more important than the preamp. You have to look at the entire system working together. I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. A deluxe reverb, a pro reverb, a twin reverb. They all have the same preamp. Literally, it's the same board with the same components on the entire board. The only difference is the deluxe reverb's got a 470 ohms. Wait. You got a 47 ohm resistor, where the others have a 100 ohm resistor in the phase inverter. Other than that, all those amps have the exact same preamp, exact same circuit when it comes to all those things. Now the Pro Reverb and the Twin have mids pots and bright switches, but other than that, they're the same circuit. The difference is all in the output section and the voltages coming off the output transformers and the speakers and the cabinet. So play a deluxe reverb, then play a twin reverb, and tell me if they sound the same. Now, granted, the deluxe reverb's got lower plate voltages in its preamp, but it's not all just the preamp. But that does not mean that you could take a deluxe reverb amp and take out the deluxe reverb preamp and put in a Marshall preamp and have it still sound like a deluxe reverb. You know, they all work together. And look at the video I put up this morning, Victor, when I talked about, poorly, but I think the point was made about how the output transformer and that Vibrolux is rated for 28 watts. That's 28 watts clean. It's not like the signal goes up, hits that 28 watts and levels off. It goes up and then it compresses. It can't get it as high as fast as it would if it were just a linear thing. And that is one of the big differences in sound between a deluxe reverb and a Vibrolux reverb and a Pro reverb. If you put in a different set of transformers, your Vibrolux reverb is a Pro reverb with 210s. If you were to change the output tubes to 6V6s and almost nothing else about the amp, your Vibrolux reverb is now a deluxe reverb with two 10-inch speakers. But they all sound different. Vive la différence. Hey, Colby Jack, appreciate that. I'll get to you, I promise. I just saw that popping up. Good, and you're in the hospital bed, you lazy so-and-so. Hard to type on a phone. Oh. I'm glad to hear that the stuff is working. I hope they find out and you don't have any long-term effects. When I was in the hospital, this is not a story competition thing. I hate it when someone tells a story and it's like, oh, I can top that. But I'm saying this out of commiseration and because it's kind of funny. When I was in the hospital after the gallbladder removal, some little nurse came in and injected something in the IV and walked out of the room. It was a new bag that was hooked up to the main line. And I began to feel a burning just going up my arm. And it was a real excruciating pain, like hot nails were migrating their way up towards my heart. And I got out of bed and looked at the bag and it said potassium something. And I knew that the wrong amount of potassium would certainly cause that pain that I was feeling. And I decided I didn't want to feel that pain anymore. So I pushed the red button and said, hey, someone needs to come disconnect this. And they said, someone will be right there, sir. And no one came, and no one came. And I turned off the IV pump. And then all the red lights started flashing and alarms went off and nurses came in real fast. And they were so mad at me until I said, yeah, I was being given the wrong dosage of potassium, which is not even on my goddamn chart because I had time to look at the chart at that point. And I said, this was agonizing. And I'm a 50-year-old guy who does technology, and I knew how to turn the damn thing off. And I was aware enough of, I'm with it enough to know what was going on. Think of all the patients you have here who don't know why they're hurting, who don't have any ability to tell you that they're hurting, and you're just making them suffer. So doctors and nurses, they were so mad at me about turning that machine off. I said, you're lucky I didn't throw it out the goddamn window, because when I get angry, I tend to channel my grandfather. So good, and if it gets on your nerves a bit too much, just throw it out the goddamn window. On Marshalls with bus wires and ground loops, you can just say on Marshalls. Could nylon washers on both sides of the pots and heat shrink on the bushings isolate the pots from chassis ground, eliminating those ground loops? That's the wrong way to do it, Lenny. You don't want to have your pots held on with plastic, and you don't want to do all these things to avoid just changing the air. It's so simple to fix, and I've shown the most proper way to do it with dedicated chassis connections, and I've shown the easy way to do it where you just remove the bus wire and then you have wires going to the back of individual pots. Each pot is attached to the chassis with a new zinc-coated toothed washer, and everything is cleaned and tightened, and there you go. No more buzz, but you don't want nylon washers on your pots, and you don't want heat shrink on the bushings. You want the pots to be tied to the chassis. If for no other reason, that when you turn the controls, it would be noisy if the chassis wasn't tied to the pots. Those pot shells need to be grounded for shielding purposes. Hey, Fletch's 40 got a high watt with a taste for eating EL34s. That can happen. Uses 100 ohm 100 ohm grid stoppers. But I read that 1K is what the EL34 spec sheet recommends, worth changing the resistors. Yeah, high watt is coming from an era of British design that was influenced by British hi-fi design. So they were big fans of 100 ohm screen grids, as in the least value possible. You see the same thing in AC30s, because Dick Jennings was reading the same British hi-fi design books. Yeah, you definitely want to increase the screen grids to 1K. Now make sure you're talking about the screen grids, because you say grid stoppers. There's the grid stopper is usually referring to the resistor in series before the actual G2, the actual grid where the AC signal comes in. And there's a screen grid stopper, which is on the screen pin. 100 ohm is much more common for the screen grid. Usually you're going to have like a 2.2K resistor as a grid stopper on high watts. You can increase that to see earlier in the chat where that similar question came up. And I've got some high watt videos on the channel. Look at those, and those are for DR103 and one other. I don't remember. I don't know which model you have, but you might find some useful information in there. Hey, Admin Ag1. That's my second favorite They Might Be Giants song. It's just a little harder to sing at tempo. Fender 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue with ET65. Great. GR7 and Tube Screamer. Great, great. Thinking of removing the bright cap or adding a mid spot. My thoughts on how to address the scooped mid range. Well, first of all, the Deluxe Reverb does not have a scooped mid range. You do have an exaggerated high end response if you have the 47 picofarad bright cap put in place, but the Deluxe Reverb is one of the least scooped Fenders. Same for the normal channel on a Super Reverb because of the 6.8K mid spot. But you can put in a mid spot. I've shown that in a lot of the, specifically on the reissue Deluxe Reverbs that I work on. I'll put in 100K audio taper. So between 5 o'clock and noon, it's the range of the mid spot on a Fender Twin, and from noon up, you get mids boost, then actual overdrive out of that circuit. So that's an easy way to do it. I wouldn't mess with, I would take out the bright cap definitely, then seeing how you like the amp. But the ET65 is not a scooped sounding speaker. It's a fairly balanced sounding speaker. The Deluxe Reverb reissue, once that bright cap is gone, is a pretty balanced sounding amp. And you have a GR7, so if you want to add more mids, you can do it with that. Is the GR7 the EQ? The EQ pedal, is that what I'm thinking of, or am I thinking of a different Boss pedal? Hey, Scott from Baltimore. Single player, hi from Europe. Oh, hi from Memphis, single player 75. Can I tell him about, or her, about a Laney LC52 channel 50 watt 1x12 tube combo? It's supposed to be late 90s, early 2000s PSP, of course. Very loud. Is it any good? Thanks. I don't know. I don't know that I've ever had that model. I don't get as many Laneys here as European techs get. Laney has been slow to make inroads into the American market. There's this stuff from the late 60s and early 70s, and there's a lot more stuff recently, but there's a big gap, and I have just not seen that model. I don't think so. Maybe if Brad were to watch this, he could let you know. I don't know, but I'll tell you this, and this is no disrespect to Laney owners or Laney lovers, but if I had let's say it's early 2000s, so it's 25 years old or so, I wouldn't pay much for a 25-year-old Laney, but from what I have seen of the Laneys I've worked on, they're unlikely to have anything go drastically wrong. So whatever's in there should be fixable, but I cannot say that for sure because I'm not familiar with that model. But thank you for joining. I can't promise to know everything. I know what I know, and I do a little soft shoe shuffle on the rest. No one wants to see me dance. Hey, Bob Egan. I am pretty inundated. And I'm not sure that I would be able to take in a 68 Princeton reissue right now. I need to find the time to make a contact form, make the website just say, hey, check out the YouTube channel for all the stuff that's going on. But if you want me to work on your amp, fill out this form so that everything goes to, all the amp requests go to one place with a format where the questions that I need answered ahead of time are already laid out. So, because I get so many requests a day in between all the spam and everything on the general email account, it's become impossible to wade through. And people either say, hey, I got my app's acting up, what's wrong with it? I don't have a crystal ball. Or they give me an 18-page story. I'd like to say short story, but it's never short, about their life in general as musicians. And at the end of it, they get to a description of the problem with the amp. And it just eats so much time. And I've got to find a solution for that other than hiring someone. But if you've shot me an email, Bob, I'll look for it. The issue is, all right, I'm talking to a guy named Bob Egan. The email address may be Bob Egan at blah, blah, blah. The email may be, Princeton Rocks 76 at yahoo.com. So it's hard for me to have a connection between the person and the username. It gets very up in the air. Sorry. Hey, Steve DeP. He's in the market for another 15 to 20 watt amp, preferably needing to get a great clean sound. Currently have a Friedman Pink Taco and a PV Classic 20. Well, you're welcome, my friend Steve. Well, there are three great choices traditionally. You get a Vox AC15 C1 or C1X. You can get a Princeton reverb reissue, or you can get a deluxe reverb reissue. Unless you want to pay more, in which case you can look at the Cerebella and other options. But those are the trifecta of great clean amps. The Princeton's 12 watts, deluxe reverb is 22 watts, and the Vox is a very, very loud 15 watts. Those are great sounding clean amps, and they would both pair very well with your Friedman, and they would probably make you want to let go of the Classic 20. Hey, sent to me. That's very kind of you. You did a big super chat last week or the week before. You don't. I appreciate it, but please don't feel obligated. It means a lot to me, though. Thank you. Having the choice for the signal chain side, are carbon composition resistors worthwhile compared to carbon film, or is the noise factor associated with carbon comps not worth going there? Having the choice. Thanks. Well, I've touched on this in other chats. Have you ever noticed on the gear what's it called, the gear page and other forums like that? No one ever says, "Oh, that restaurant was okay. Had a pretty good shake there once. The burger's all right. The fries are nothing to write home about." No one ever says that. No one ever says, "Hey, there's new shoe store opened up and they had some really nice stuff, but they didn't have my size." Everything is either the best, or the absolute worst, and we got to kill it. We got to nuke it from orbit. There's just no, "Hey, that's good." Or even worse, there's no, "Under certain circumstances, that is a very good choice, as long as you keep these factors in mind." There's no nuance. And there's no acceptance of what the reality actually is versus some hyperbolic extreme stance that must be defended at all costs. Hey, Brad, just talking about you. So, in this 1980 Vibrolux reverb, it's got all carbon comps still. And they are, 43 years old. They're all fine. There's a 64 deluxe reverb there next to a 65 deluxe reverb. On each of them, I changed out 3 or 4 resistors. And I changed out the old carbon comps for new carbon comps. And those amps are just fine, and they're quiet, and they sound great. But if I needed to change resistors in this 1980, I would use carbon films, because this amp is not inherently as valuable, given the collector's market, as the 64 and 65. And you won't hear a huge or any difference changing 2 or 3, 6 or 7 resistors from carbon composite to carbon film. There's a dwindling supply of carbon composites now that they're no longer being made by major manufacturers. So if I have carbon comps, which I do, I'm saving them for the 64s and the 65s and the 66s and stuff, because there's no harm in using them. There's no downside to using them in that circuit that was designed around. And the amp sounds itself with them. Now, if I have an AC30, if I have a Marshall, even from the same period, it can be a 63 AC30, it can be a 67 Marshall. So many of them either came with carbon films to begin with, like the Marshalls with the Pyres and the Iskras. I'll use a carbon film happily. If it's an older JTM45 that had carbon comps, I'll talk to the owner, because it's a higher gain circuit. In that circuit, you may begin to hear some slight benefit of carbon film versus carbon composite. But if he wants it to be like it was in the factory, it'll go back to him still being a mixture, because most of them are mixtures. In an AC30 from 63, especially the ones using the Hunts and the Erie's carbon composite resistors, those were terrible resistors. They were crappy. They were not as good as the things that Fender used. And the amp was exposed to a lot more humidity and heat. for various reasons. And so I almost invariably replace them with high quality, very nice high quality carbon film resistors, because a lot of the 60s Voxes also use carbon films, so it's not period incorrect. But way too much is made of the difference on the forums. According to this, some people on the forums for whom carbon composites suck, you should only ever use metal oxides because the thermal noise, blah, 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 even though they don't sound very interesting at certain positions in the amp compared to some kind of variant of carbon. I find carbon film to be the best general purpose choice. I stock a lot of them, followed by metal film. Metal film, if you're doing a lot of high gain amps, you want to have a whole lot of metal film resistors. And I use them a lot. I like the 2-watt Vishay's an awful lot. And I've used some very esoteric metal films to get specific kinds of sounds. I think some of the very large kind of orangey tan Vishay 2 watts sound phenomenal in certain circuits. They get a graininess to them. But it's not in isolation. It's in those circuits in certain spots. That's where I hear the difference. If you change out 1.5K cathode resistor in almost any amp, you can use any resistor you want. If you could find a 1.5K cement block that would fit in that space, you would not notice any difference. And hell, in a fully bypassed stage, you can take the resistor and cap out and just put in a red LED with a 1.8 volt forward voltage drop, and you won't hear any difference, except you won't ever have to change a cap or have a bad resistor. So that's a very long-winded way of saying way too much is made of it, and a lot of stuff that is blamed on old carbon composite resistors is actually noisy boards. A lot of old amps, Fenders specifically, have had all the original caps ripped out, all the original resistors changed out, orange drops, and badly installed half-watt metal films. And the real issue with that amp to begin with, all that time, was that the board absorbed moisture, there was leaky DC, and the act of heating up all those eyelets to change all those components drove enough moisture out of the board that the tech thought he had fixed it because the noise was a little bit lower afterwards. Well, that noise is going to come back. You can have a very noisy amp chock full of orange drops and all metal films. You have to have everything working together towards a common goal. And that's what a lot of people lose sight of. Now, you can give the average hobbyist builder $1,000 worth of Allen Bradleys and old Pacifica transformers and new old stock Sylvania tubes and say, build the best amp in the world, and they won't build you an amp as well as, say, John Suhr would using a Mojotone kit and a bunch of 5-cent half-watt carbon films, because you have to know what to do with it. And I'm not talking down to anyone here. I'm just talking, just talking. Hey, Daniel Mincher. If I call out Daniel and I don't call out you, it's not because you don't matter to me. It's just I only catch little bits flying by. Hey, Adam, I don't know the Orange Dual Terror amp very well. So I know that just in general, yeah, you could put in, say, a 12AY7 and have a lot less gain at the front stages. But I'm not familiar enough with that amp to tell you beyond that. You can always turn the volume down on your guitar if you need to, or lower your pickups if it's extreme. But I think, given the name of the Dual Terror, I'm not sure that clean headroom is that amp's forte. This is how it starts. I was talking to another client about this. When you experience a really good amp, and then you realize it's good at this thing, but it can't do everything. This is what it does. That's when the madness creeps in. You're like, then I need another amp that does this other thing. And that's how you end up with guys with 30 amps, and they're trying to figure out a way to use them all at once without ground loops and switching back and forth. It's really hard to get everything from one amp. So if you have something which is designed to do really high gain, I think the Dual Terror is sold as a high gain amp. It may not have the best cleans in the world, or you may need to go to the clean channel and turn your volume knob down on your guitar to get the sound that you hear closer to the sound you hear in your head. But I am not familiar with that orange dual terror, so I cannot help you more than that. Sorry. I wish I could have all the things that I'm reading be here rather than here, because I know that I spend half the time on these streams just slightly not making eye contact with you guys as opposed to looking at the camera. But it's difficult. If I look at the camera, I can't see what people are saying. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate that. As I get some technical issues worked out, we'll do it for real. Hopefully we'll be able to not only get it working, but I'll actually have some good content for you. I know where all the good stuff is. And if you guys could all get here, we all go together, although we need a bigger car than my little Golf. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate that. Hey, Gooden. Have you tried voice to text? Maybe that would help. Of course, then the doctors would think you're talking to yourself, but, you probably do that anyway. I see you, Bottom Kitchen. Hey, did Amnesia, should he spend the extra money for the Keeley Katana boost versus others? What's the special magic hype for boost circuits, FET versus MOSFET? Well, I'm the wrong person to ask about that because I built the world's best clean boost, and it's not easy. I used, first I came up with a circuit that took 9 volts DC coming from the input, and I changed it to 5 volts DC. Then I ran it through a converter that gave me plus minus 15 volts DC, so I could power some analog devices, op amps that are usually only used in studio mixer circuits. And then I used some really nice optical isolators that would kind of be like having different faders that would crossfade in 3 milliseconds. So instead of using relays and doing the thing this way, it would just be changing resistance optically. And people did not know it was the best clean boost in the world, because when you clean boost into an amplifier, the sound will change. So if the sound changes in a way that you find pleasing, you say, oh, it's the greatest boost pedal in the world. If it changes in a way that you find unpleasing, you say it's a terrible boost pedal. But the thing is, you could have 20 boost pedals, and if you were to set them up and measure them so they all are boosting 9 dB, exactly 9 dB, with a fairly similar frequency response, even if it's not perfect like mine was perfect, even if it has a higher noise floor than mine, because mine was perfect, you will like or dislike them all the same if you're actually doing a blind test versus saying, I like the green one because it's green, because the amp is going to react the same way to all of them. Now, it gets a little more complicated than that. There's also impedance and how well each one officially can drive the input of a tube amp. Mine was very good at that. But it's a lot of times with the boost pedals, it's the amp behavior that we're hearing, not the boost pedal. So there is such a thing as good enough on a boost pedal to an amp that works well with a boost pedal. So if you have the world's best boost pedal and you play into a JC120, it's going to sound like shit. If you do that into a JTM45, it's going to make you very, very happy. So if you want to get the Keeley Katana boost, that's fine. Keeley makes good stuff. If you want to get the Sir boost, was it called the Coco boost? That's a good boost. But you can also just go find like a used Boss ODS or whatever, and turn the gain down and the level up, and the tone kind of 3/4 or 1 o'clock, and there's your clean boost. You can do all kinds of things. I will say, do not waste your money on a Klon. The Klon is one of the worst sounding boosts in the world, and not that we can afford them, but for those of us who have used them, who aren't actually being paid to tell you something bullshit, this is what a Klon sounds like. Your floor, sir. Let's see. That's right, Boomer Martin. You stay here because you're an okay boomer. Are there? I need to stop looking at myself in the little lens there when I'm supposed to be looking looking at the little view screen. I meant to do something cool and look at the camera, look at you guys. Instead, I looked slightly to the side. I need a director. I need a producer and a director and a script girl. Nikki's out of town, so you know. Any good tips when looking for an app tech? Any good questions to ask them? Well, that's tough. The best thing you can do is ask other musicians in your area who they've used, who they've been pleased with, and you know, Yelp is not going to be good for that because most people who get their amp worked on, if the amp tech does a really good job, they may or may not put anything on Yelp. If the amp tech does an okay job, they probably won't think to put anything on Yelp. If the amp tech makes any mistake at all, or they perceive that a mistake was made or whatever, they're certainly going to let the world know about it. So Yelp, you're just going to get the squeakiest wheels. I have not checked my own Yelp rating because I don't care. I've been to way too many bad restaurants that got good Yelp reviews for me to trust that system. But because that's the other thing, someone can create 20 email accounts and 20 positive reviews, and hey, so just talk to other players who they use and if they're happy with the results. Don't go in with questions for the tech as if you're going to be screening the tech, because even a great tech's going to be like, well, if you don't believe I can do it, that's fine. There's 3 other guys in this town. Good luck. I will say that being an amp tech does not always line up with people with great social skills. So many of the people I know in the industry who are fantastic techs are almost impossible to have a conversation with. I think Brad and I are kind of representing the least subhuman form of amp tech. You know, we are, you know, sort of social, demented and sad, but social. But we don't. We actually come out of our caves once in a while and experience sunlight. So you know, it's an odd industry. Thanks, Jacob M. Appreciate that. Hey, Brett. Yeah, bathroom remodel. I have. I'm hoping this next week to take the old ceiling down and to take all that crap, all the old plaster and lath out to the pile in our driveway, and then rent a dumpster to come and be dropped off. Put all that in there, get the dumpster to haul all that off, and then I'll have all the debris out. All the debris, out of the bathroom, and all the old sections of pipe that I've cut that are some of which are still in the basement. Not the copper stuff. I'm gonna see if I can sell the copper stuff, but all the lead and the old galvanized steel and stuff. With my mother's health issues this past month and a half, the bathroom went on hold because any time I had that was not spent at a hospital or at her house helping her take a bath or getting her dinner or whatever, it's been fun. Has been either working or crashing down on the couch for an hour at the end of the day, just utterly exhausted and sleeping when I can. So I was not ready to go do a demolition on top of that. But I have got to get this stuff out of here. I want, when Nikki gets back, don't tell her, no one tell her, okay? She never watches these things. Anyway, when Nikki gets back in town, I want the driveway, the big clutter of shit that's been at the end of our driveway for the last 6 months to be miraculously gone, and all the old stuff out of the bathroom, and at least have some sheetrock up on this to make the new ceiling. It doesn't have to be perfect up there. I'll mud it and tape it later when I do the walls. But if I can just get the sheetrock up, so there's not an open space to the very hot attic, I can do all that while she's out of town. So that's the next step. All right, we are at the top of the hour. When we come back, we'll get to Dinner Amnesia's question on T-Rex pedals. Actually, I'll skip that one because I have no opinion on T-Rex pedals. Sorry, Did. As Scott from Baltimore was just walking on God only knows. Well, hopefully you'll have better luck with it than I did. Just trying to remember how it goes live in front of people. But it's such a gorgeous song. And if you can figure out what key it is, let everyone else know. Because I don't know if anyone knows what key that song's in, or keys, multiple keys. Its tonal center is just bliss. All right, so when we come back, we'll get to Bambule's question. We're gonna take our first of two 7-minute intermissions, and I'll see you guys back in a little bit. Go stretch your legs, etc. And some of you lucky so-and-sos will get an ad. Sorry to keep you waiting. I saw a comment that I'll be getting to from Zaprito Pedro about SMPS 12-volt supplies and heater DC elevation and grounding questions, and I was like, let me think about that. And as I was thinking about that, I realized that I was just in absentia here, so we will get to that. But it's a good question. I almost threw off the entire stream because it's like, that's a really good question. What do you think about that? Maybe I'll have the answer by the time I get there. Let's see. Oh, I missed one from, no, I didn't. That's where we're going. Bambule. In an amp of moderate to highish gain, where would I suggest to place the tone stack, beginning, end, or in different places of the preamp? Well, in general, you want to have the tone stack usually after the major gain stages, so you can control what result you get. Otherwise, it's going to sound like that Mesa Caliber 22, Studio 22 that Brad had on his channel the other day, where he had to use a graphic EQ pedal to get anything at all useful out of it. Mesa added all the gain after the preamp, and then they realized that their amp sounded terrible, so they added a very elaborate graphic EQ. And then the Mesa fanboys say, see, they're geniuses. Like, no, they just put the tone stack in the wrong damn place. But the tone stack is one way to shape the sound. You can also do that with bright caps. You can also do that with coupling cap values, impedance values, the cathode networks. You know, there are lots of ways to shape the signal to get a distorted sound that you want, and then you have fine control that is available to the player through a traditional tone stack, and that's what you're going to find in the Soldano. That's what you're going to find, which is what Mesa. The most successful Mesas are the ones which are just bad copies of the Soldano, the dual rectifier series. If you look at what the exceptions to that are partial exceptions. The Trainwreck has a lot of gain after the tone stack, but it's a very specific kind of gain, the way he shapes it, that works well with the tone stack. And then if you look at the various versions of the Overdrive Special that Dumble did, the earlier ones, because there's also derived from the same basement layout design that Trainwreck took inspiration from. The preamp, there's initial preamp, and then there's a tone stack, and then there's more gain stages. And then later Dumble amps, he first put in a kind of a fixed tone stack after the distortion. And then on later ones, I think he calls it the Skyline, he added a separate EQ just for the overdrive stuff. But usually you're going to want to have the tone stack after the major gain stages. It just gives the player a lot more useful control. Come for the amps, stay for the cool tours. Well, if I can get the cool tours part working, I hope to. I've had some better luck with the two apps I've been trying to use, but I found that Verizon is having network issues in the areas where I would be driving around. They're supposedly going to be resolved by 6:30 p.m. today. I'm going to find out and test that. I just don't want to do the whole thing and then have the whole thing crash and burn. I had two apps, one of which never lost a stream, but it would get really blocky and yucky sounding and choppy. And the other one would give the best image quality, best sound quality, the low volume, and then just die and cause the phone to overheat. So, and I found that having the case on the phone makes it worse. And I found that if you have the charger connected to the phone, it makes it worse. So you can't charge the phone while live streaming, or it exacerbates the heating issues. But if you don't have it charged and you're live streaming, how long a live stream can you do before you lose battery? So if there was some way for me to stick this Sony on my dash and then live stream it without using the phone for video at the same time, I would. But I don't think that there's a suction cup dash holder that I trust my my mirrorless DSLR on. Well, if your regular tech has made it to 82, I hope he keeps going. And I'm sorry he had a stroke. I hope it works out. Strokes are no joke. My mom had some serious strokes about 5 years ago, and it was the worst, two of which happened in my presence. Fortunately for her, but it's one of those things at the time you just stay calm and reassure her and just do what you need to do and call the ambulance and all that stuff. Meanwhile, inside your mind, you're like, fuck, 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 what the hell is this? What the hell is this? What the hell is this? Mom, 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 mom. It's frightening. So, let's see. See you, Johnny Beck. Michael Murray, I don't know about a 73 twin reverb. I'm really booked, for which I'm grateful, and I don't mean to appear like you're not good enough. It's none of that. Just I can only take in so many at a time, and I try to take in that I know can be fixed. And there's a lot of twins trying to get in here. It may happen, but I can't tell you when. I'm sorry. Hey, did any thoughts on the blue chip picks? $35 to $50. The material is expensive, to be fair, but it's nice musically. Is it nice musically? I remember cool picks. Yeah, it's great. I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, it's well worth it if you don't lose it. And it's well worth it if you find the right one for what you want. Let's see. Here is a Dunlop Primetone 1.3, which is said by many to be equivalent to the blue chip. Very similar size, very similar shape. Both have a bevel. And this Primetone, it's got a thud to it. Whereas the blue chip, there's much less pick thud. And when it comes to strumming, the Primetone fights you. Whereas the blue chip just glides and makes you feel like, oh, that's so much easier. You ever, when you were starting off playing, were you ever playing your guitar, your beginner guitar, and it was hard to play? You didn't know it was hard to play. You thought all guitars were hard to play, and so you just worked at it. Then you played someone else's guitar, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, the action is not really high, and everything plays in tune, and it stays in tune, and this is so much easier. And you didn't even know that it was possible for something to be that much better. In a very real way, depending on the guitar style you play, the blue chip pick is that kind of difference. For like, okay, I've been using these Black Ice picks. Yeah, Douglas, it's an Eastman E8D, the Sitka version of the HD28. But you go to the blue chip, and it just glides, and it's beautiful. It just feels great. Here's a Max Grip Jazz 3, which I also like for electric. Same size, the round tip blue chip. Which I find insufficient for acoustic compared to the 48. These things are worth it to me, and they live here on my desk. And if I were playing, I would make sure that I did not lose them. Sadly, this material cannot be dyed. This very expensive material is brown. That's the color they are. So, you know, if you were to go someplace with dark brown floors, don't drop the fucker. There is a role for bright red picks in the world. And there's a role in the world for just this Dunlop nylon 1.14. Which is actually kind of the most similar pick I have to the Blue Chip. But it doesn't feel as good. And it doesn't do the single note stuff as well, because it can't really push through the string, and that nylon's not going to last. So I'd probably go through, if I were actually gigging out, I'd probably go through 2 of these a night, whereas I'd probably go through 1 of these a decade. So, you know. The important thing is, you know yourself, know what you want. And they've got if you buy a pick from them and it's not the right pick, you're like, okay, I think I need the thicker one. They'll exchange it. They've got a good policy on that. Though they got a video put up about them from the Wall Street Journal about a week ago. And since then, I'm sure they're pretty busy. I like the Blue Chip for electric, but as I said at the beginning, this one that Keith sent me, it's got a round tip, so I can't do a pinch harmonic with this one. But I'm gonna order one of their standard big jazzes, not the $80 one. Those are because these are a much thicker piece of this material for those. I'll probably get like a 40, and their 40 is 40 thousandths of an inch. This is equivalent to 0.89 millimeters, but it sounds a lot bigger than, say, this Flow 0.88, which is a pick I like a lot as well. But it's interesting. I saw someone's comment. I don't remember if it's on one of the previous live streams or a video referencing one of the previous live streams where I was talking about picks, and they said they were shocked by how thick my picks are because they use a 0.5 millimeter or a 0.6 millimeter, and I can't play with a 0.6 millimeter. I think the closest thing I have here is, it's got to be this old nylon Herca, and it just flops. Same thing for electric. It's just this little floppy thing. Van Halen got great results with a 0.6 millimeter. I can't even get the strings to work on this thing. Anyway, but ask Zach. Zach Childs did a great video the other day on how to know what pickups to get for your Tele, and he was wise and honest enough to say, before you change the pickups, are you using the right pick? Are your pickups the right height? Do you have the right pots? Do you have the right speaker? Are you setting your amp correctly? All these things matter. And so if you want to get a thick, bluesy lead, you want something like Gary Moore, and you're using a little Fender Thin, you're not going to get there. Or, you got to try things. And I can't use anything smaller than a 0.88. And then, even then, it's not just the thickness, it's the material as well, because this Dunlop Jazz 3 Ultex is probably 1.5 millimeters, and it is one of the brightest motherfucking picks in the world. A similarly sized pick of a different material is quite dark, so you just got to play a bunch. It's just Ryan says, Dave Gascoigne at Roswell Amps is a genius. Whoever suggested him to sort out his 68 Deluxe, thank you. Well, that's good. I'm glad to know. Glad to know that Dave's doing good work. And everyone look up Dave Gascoigne at Rosewell Amps and see where he's at. And if you're local, give him a shot. I'm always glad to know of other good techs out there. Yeah, Joe, it really was not pleasant. For those who missed earlier, I'm talking about when Joe's referencing what I was saying about when they gave me the wrong quantity of potassium in my IV when I was at the hospital. Not a pleasant thing. Hey, David Hoisman. In my opinion, does a British voice speaker like a Vintage 30 make a Blackface Deluxe sound more Marshall than Fender? He tried this and is not a fan. Well, I don't think it makes it sound anything like a Marshall. In fact, I think Vintage 30 specifically makes a Deluxe Reverb sound like a recorded and mastered Deluxe Reverb, in that you're going to have kind of an exaggerated mid-scoop. The thing I don't often like about Vintage 30s, if you're playing with overdrive, is they've got a spike around 2K that can get really harsh. But there are an awful lot of people who love a Vintage 30 in a Fender Deluxe. That is like the Brent Mason recipe, and he doesn't sound too martially through that. I'm not a huge fan of designating speakers as American versus British, because which one? Are you talking about an old Fane that you might find in a WEM cab paired with a Hiwatt? Well, that thing's not going to sound at all like a 20-watt Marshall Greenback, and it's going to sound an awful lot like, closer to a JBL, which is American, but that JBL, which is American, is not going to sound anything like a little Alnico Jensen in an old Tweed. I think the British-American thing is a lazy, too broad, non-specific designation. There are speakers which have certain characteristics, there are amps that have certain characteristics, and there are players that want certain sounds, and you have to find the way they play together. And it sounds like I'm putting everyone down. I'm not. But there's just it's a weird thing. I've been watching the guitar industry for a long time. And I think all this started with like Vintage Guitar Magazine, and then Guitar Player and Guitar World, and even Guitar for the Practicing Musician. Like the same 5 or 6 writers had to do all the articles to keep these things going, to keep sales coming in for ads. And, with a few exceptions, like Jas Obrecht and stuff, most of the people who were writing for Guitar World or Guitar Player were not particularly good writers. Yeah, if you're a really good journalist, you don't get into writing about guitars. If you're a really great short story writer or whatever writer, you don't end up at that job. You get that job because you like guitars, and you found this way to get this job. You get a little side hustle with whatever else you're doing. You write articles for these magazines, and they have the same information again and again and again. And they're kind of lazy, or very willing to accept the common wisdom. And so you have all these myths that get repeated, and shorthand that gets entrenched. And it was just a way to sell full color ads. Now, like I said, with like mentioning Jas Obrecht, there are exceptions, but those exceptions really stood out. Even so, they would be assigned to ask a guitarist for a feature, and the questions are the same questions asked again and again, sometimes reworded. It's just like a formula. And I think that's where the British versus American thing came from. I would say it was almost more important to say the speakers we consider British tended to be recorded in British studios, and the speakers we consider American tended to be recorded in American studios. Very different microphones, very different tape machines, very different mastering processes and EQ curves. Now that all kind of ended by about 76, 78, but by then we were all entrenched. There's been major lawsuits over potassium overdoses in hospitals. Doesn't surprise me. I was pretty furious. It had been a long time since someone had hurt me that badly, and I was at least able to fight back. Hey, Victor, I'm not sure what you're referring to here in terms of you guess there's a difference between fixed or cathode bias. There certainly is, but without more context, I'm not sure what you're asking about. I don't. If I missed a previous question from you, I apologize, Victor. I always love seeing you here. So if there's a question or something that you posted that I missed, repost it. I'll get you. I promise. Hey, Corey Herget. Probably, or Hergot, probably a dumb question, or ergo, probably a dumb question, probably a dumb answer. But will I cause any issues by running my 76 Baseman 10 that wants an 8 ohm load at 16 ohms, currently running a 4 16 ohm Jensen C10Rs at a 16 ohm load? Whoa, how are you getting 4 16 ohm speakers to be a 16 ohm load? Okay. Okay, never mind. Serious peril. Gotcha. Sorry. I saw a bunch of numbers swimming, and my brain I don't do well with numbers. I started to swim. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. What we do, we swim. And I keep looking at that. I need to look at the lens when I do those gags, not look just slightly off. I look shifty if I won't look you in the eye. Let's see. No, you won't have any problem at all doing a mismatch from 8 ohm to 16 or doing 8 ohm to 4. What you don't want to do is use a 16 ohm load if you have an output transformer that's rated for 4 ohms, or use a 4 ohm load on one rated for 16 ohms, or use a 2 ohm load on an output rated for 8 ohms, or vice versa. So you have 2, I'll do it this way. You have 2, 4, 8, and 16, and you can't see it, but my toes are doing something cool right now. Those are the options we have by and large. Those are the impedances we have. And if you have a 4 ohm output on your amp, you can be offset by 1. So you can go to 2, you can stay at 4, you can go to 16. Those are all safe. They're going to sound different. You're going to have different volume levels, with the loudest being 4 to 4. If you have an 8-put output, you can go 4 or 16, but you cannot go 2. If you have a 16 ohm output, you can do 8. You're not going to have the opportunity most of the time to do 32, so you can do 16 or you can do 8. You can't do 4 or 2. Now, I bend that rule sometimes. I'll have a super reverb on the bench, which is expecting a 2 ohm load, and I'll connect it to an 8 ohm cab, so I'm offset by 2. But I'm not testing the amp loud. I'm not even approaching the maximum clean wattage of the amp, let alone pushing the amp, just for my test purposes, because it's convenient for me to have my test cab. Because a lot of times, if I have an amp and I have its actual speakers and its actual cab, and I plug the amp into those speakers and it sounds bad, I don't know if I have bad speakers or if I have a bad amp. So if I test the amp with my cab, which I know is correct, and I have a pleasant sound and all my voltages are fine, and then I know that the amp is good, then I'll test their speakers, and then I'll always do the final bias on that amp connected to their speakers so that all the load is correct. Couldn't he rewire it to star ohms, 8 ohms? Yeah, I think so. But Joe, I 4 16 ohms. Yeah, you could do. Well, no, you can't do 8 ohms. I don't think. You can do 16 ohms, or you can do 4 ohms with 4 16s. Unless I'm missing something. Brad can answer that better than I can, because right now I'm trying to do 18 things at once, and he asked me to do math on top of it. I can barely do math on a good day. I'm serious. I don't remember numbers. Numbers just fly out of my head. All that stuff, I have spreadsheets. I create the spreadsheets. I know what the variables are. I've already done all my formulas, and I know that if I'm measuring DCR on this, I measure 79.2. I have like 5 seconds to go from the bench, turn around, type in 79.2 on my spreadsheet before it evaporates from my head, because it's going to evaporate from my head. So I have an adversarial relationship with numbers. And as long as you know that about yourself, you can get by just fine. Hey, Alan, have I ever fixed a vintage Super Beetle? Found a very non-functioning one and wondering if you should fix it up. I assume you mean the amp, not the car. If you're talking about the amp, no, you should not try, because it's going to be a terrible money pit, because the Super Beetles use some germanium transistors which have not been available in forever. And it's not like you could get them and say, oh, it's a 2N47 or whatever. They were just germanium transistors, and you'd measure them and see, hey, this is the HFE, this is the gain this one has. So this one's a green one, and this one's a yellow one, and this one's a blue one, and you put them in different places in the amp based on that. You could spend throw $1,000 at that amp, and it may fix it, it may not. It may just be an endless money pit, and at the end of it, you're going to have a not great sounding solid-state amp. But if you are talking about the car, yeah, those are still fixable. Any reason why my amps sound better, play more dynamically plugged into a $10 power strip than a filtered, isolated surge suppressor like a Trip Light? This recent discovery has outraged me. I want to approach this cautiously, because I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that there may be factors that you are unaware of, like in the filtered, isolated surge protector like a Trip Light. Those use capacitors to do the filtering, so that if there's any harmonic ugliness on the incoming AC signal, because it's on the same line as a refrigerator, compressor, or whatever, it's supposed to filter some of that out. The thing is, if it had done its job protecting you, say, from a lightning strike, that cap may be damaged. You may have a Trip Light that has got some caps that aren't behaving well. So the AC coming out of that may not be 120 volts or balanced compared to what's coming into the $10 power strip. So I don't think that you're necessarily getting better sound out of the cheap one than the expensive one just because life sucks and the cheap one is better. You may have a problem with a more expensive one, but a correctly functioning, a more expensive one might sound exactly the same. Notice, I didn't say might sound better, I said might sound exactly the same. I'm not a huge believer in a lot of the stuff sold to people when it comes to power stuff. If you really want regulated filtered power, you're going to spend $2,000 to $4,000 typically. And so if you buy a power strip that's got a couple of $1 ceramic disc caps in it just to filter out some hash, that's great, but don't expect the world from it. Now, I've got Trip Light power strips connected. I've got one under this I've got two under this desk. I've got two under this bench, and I plug into Trip Lights because they're really high quality outlets. They're wired well inside, and if I ever had a problem with one of those ceramic discs, I'd either replace it or toss it because they don't do a lot for us. But I don't know for a fact, unless you've measured and seen, hey, yeah, all right, this one's putting out, the cheap one's got 120 volts coming out, the expensive one's only got 114, or put it on a scope and say, yeah, there's this weird thing riding the AC on the Trip Light. You could have a lot of things causing problems. It could also be the fact that maybe it doesn't sound any better. Maybe you tried it, you thought it sounded better. Maybe you plugged out, maybe the wall voltage was down at 110 when you're using the Trip Light, and the wall voltage just went up to 120 by the time you plugged into the cheap one. You're like, oh, that sounds better. Must be the power strip. It was some other variable that changed in your environment. I don't know, because I was not there with my equipment. But if you are happy with your $10 power strip, that is fine. I will never tell you that you need to spend more. You need to have quality, but quality does not always mean gizmos. So I use Trip Lights because I know they're rugged and they're well built, and I can repair them if necessary because nothing's molded. Robert Egan, I will find that, Bob. Thank you. I will find that, and I will reply to you, and maybe we can sneak you in at some point. I don't mean to be snobby about it. I take amps of all eras and walks of life, but I take them as I have openings. After I speak to the owner and we get on the same page about things. And sometimes your amp would not be one of these things, but sometimes I have to tell people your amp is not necessarily worth doing the repairs on, let alone shipping it 6 states away to have it repaired. You might be better off finding someone locally. It's one of those things. I have to make sure that all the expectations at the beginning are good and that everyone knows what the variables are. You don't want anyone to have hurt feelings or to be really unhappy, especially when it may be like 3 months before I could get to it and the app's 6 states away and you're wondering what's going on. If people don't know that, hey, it may be a while before I even get to it. Hey, I've seen a couple of questions asked more than once, and I appreciate people putting the, oops, I didn't mean to have that up there so long, Brad. I appreciate people using the question marks like I say down here. Maybe I need to add one above it or up there somewhere that says, please only ask any question once, because I see it, this is the same question a second time, and I think that my chat has scrolled up, and it throws me off my game. I answer them as much as possible in the order that they're asked. So if you ask a question and I have not answered it yet, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to answer your question. And therefore you need to, or I haven't seen it, you need to ask it again. It means that I have not gotten to it yet, because you can see where you are in the stream where it says, the most recently is Severio Lipari. Hey, hi, all the best. Hi, Severio. Thank you. All the best to you as well. But the most recent one that I'm seeing right now is this one from Greg G, which is probably like an hour ago. I built a monotone deluxe reverb, maybe you mean Mojotone, and I never used the normal channel. I wanted to rewire the normal channel to be in series with a vibrato channel like a JCM 800. Well, okay, is Mojotone good? I don't see the question. You wanted to. I don't think you should. It is not. Neither channel on that amp is going to behave like a high gain channel on a JCM 800. And if you made the changes to make that work, it would no longer be a good deluxe reverb, which is what it is. What I would suggest to you, if you like the sound of a deluxe reverb for cleans and semi-clean stuff, look at the world of really good sounding drive pedals, particularly some of the stuff like the Freeman small box pedal and all that stuff, where it kind of can put that in front of a Fender. It will probably be a sound more useful to you for those Marshall sounds than if you were to actually make the normal channel be cascaded gain with the vibrato channel. Now, it is possible to do what you're saying, but I think if you were to do that, since you'd have 2 extra triodes and a whole bunch and 4 other knobs to play with, 4 pot locations, you could do a lot better than just doing a JCM 800, which is really not that great an implementation of a cascaded gain circuit. You could do a train wreck kind of thing, and I've shown that on a Bassman, on like a 62 Bassman clone on the channel, or you could really do like a Freeman BE100 thing. You don't have to be limited to the JCM 800. But first, before you go to all that expense, because it's really hard to undo that, and if you don't know how to do it already, you'd have to hire someone to do it. Try really good overdrive pedals and see if that'll get you where you want. Like it could be just that, like the SL drive that Exotic has out for like $100. It could be a Friedman small box, or he's got a few others. I'm not too up on all the overdrive pedals on the market right now, but I know that they're out there and people like them. And it is never a bad idea to try a high quality pedal in lieu of modding an amp. At least try it before you change the amp, because there are a lot of Marshall-y clones out there, and that's fine, but a good sounding deluxe reverb, even a Mojotone version, is a great amp, and you don't need to lose that in the quest for something else. Hey, Matt Johnson, with push-pull amps, which side is the push and which side is pull from the inverted or non-inverted sides of the phase inverter? Well, I said that in the video kind of as shorthand. It's a little more complicated than that in the way it actually works in terms of which, but that is the shorthand version. So phase inverters are inverting. duh. But by that I mean when you go into the grid of one, the signal coming out of that grid is the inverse. And so you go to the grid of the other one, which has different polarity. The signal coming out is reversed in comparison to it. So it's really hard to say this is that, because both they are, while one is considered the positive waveform, but the other is considered the negative. So if you're looking at a traditional Fender, the one connected to the 82K plate is considered the non-inverted side, and the one connected to the 100K plate would be considered the inverted side. It's actually kind of inverse in relationship to what's coming from the input stage, which is where the 1 nanofarad cap input is. But at the same time, because it's not like it's a fixed thing that we're measuring where, hey, here's where the event starts and here's where the event stops. It's a continuing thing of music. Even when you stop playing, there's always signal there. There's always noise. And so it's always amplifying. So at what point do you say that was it gets complicated. The larger thing you need to keep in mind is when you're dealing with negative feedback, you want to make sure that, okay, the signal comes in to the phase inverter from these mixed resistors through this 1 nanofarad cap, and it goes to pin 2 of the phase inverter tube, and pin 2 is associated with the plate on pin 1, and so the plate of pin 1 is going to go to, say, V7, and the other side of the phase inverter is going to go to pin 7, and pin 6 of that other side of the phase inverter is going to be, so its plate is eventually going to get to the grid of V8. And you keep your grids that way, and you keep your primary connections that way, and you have the positive and common, or rather the tap, used secondary tap and the common tap on your output transformer secondaries, observing that same polarity. That's how the whole thing works. Beyond that, I would have to sit down and prepare graphs and charts, and Brad would probably be better at it than I am anyway. And that's right, I'm always talking down to you, Brad. Not all of us are fucking bald leprechauns. If one must store a vintage amp in a space that has high humidity, what is the best way to protect it from any damage? I would not store an amp for any period of time with high humidity. You're just asking for serious issues. I mean, I guess you could get a shit ton of silicone packs or a dehumidifier if you want to spend the utility bill. Best bet is not to store an amp knowingly in a place with high humidity. Boba Fett versus MOSFET. Sarlacc. Yeah, I don't like the SoundClouds, but fuck Behringer. Hey, it's just Ryan. Well, it's just Lyle. Nice to meet you. I love guitar and its trends. Interesting to see the whole 2-rock thing is starting to fade out. Mayer saturation or something else? Well, I don't think Mayer uses too much saturation. It's usually a pretty clean sound. But any overdrive pedal he uses, the rest of us suddenly can't afford, even when he uses little plastic garbage tube screamers. I don't know if the 2-rock thing is starting to fade out. I don't see any reason for it to. 2-rock makes fantastic amps, some of the best amps on the market these days. I cannot address your question because I don't know. Obviously, you're aware of something that I'm unaware of, but I don't keep up with trends, and I don't see much TikTok 2-rock overlap, though they do rhyme. Yeah, a dehumidifier will work, but you have to deal with water, and you have an electrical bill, if you're doing long-term storage, there are places that do temperature and climate controlled storage if you really need it. But in general, if you're comfortable in a room in a house, so will your amp be. So if it's a valuable amp, just put a dust cover over it and put it behind the couch. And if you're not dying in that room, it probably won't either. It's not a pre-war Martin, though. It can handle an awful lot of temperature changes just fine. It's the humidity, extended high humidity. Oh, pardon me. Extended periods of high humidity are not good for steel. Hey, Gooden, I think you know this. I am not criticizing anyone because of their age, and I'm not doing the tropes of, oh, boomer this, boomer that. Though I wish my mother would fucking learn how to use an iPhone. But that's my mother. That's not everyone. But I was specifically talking about the Venn diagram overlap between baby boomers and the vintage guitar and amp market. And that's just the way of the world. The same way that I look at K-pop and I'm like, I don't see the appeal. I just don't see the appeal. So, and for those out there who are younger who might watch this, I think it's sad that there probably aren't too many guys or girls in their teens or 20s who watch this channel. I wish you would. I think there's a lot to be picked up about music in general, if not from me, even from the various people on these chats. But if you like K-pop, you're absolutely right to. There's nothing wrong with it. It just does not appeal to me. Neither does the Grateful Dead. So I'd rather listen to K-pop than the Dead. So, do I think the new hand-wired Badcat amps are worth 1,000 more than the non-hand-wired? I don't know. I don't know what the non-hand-wireds go for. I don't know what the hand-wireds go for, and I don't know the quality of the hand-wired. I don't know the quality of the PCB. I have no experience with the new Badcat amps, and so I will not invent an opinion just to have one. But I will keep an eye on that mark. Yeah, I saw this when I was on the first break. Yeah, it's good vibrations. I think God only knows probably has 37 key changes. If it even has, if it ever stays in one key long enough. I mean, I guess the bulk of that was the chorus. At least is an A. At least the first two choruses. Then it goes boom, 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 boom. Oh, speaking of things that go boom, 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 boom. I was watching, rewatching Waiting for Guffman the other day, and I was just knocked out once again by the amazing faux Bernstein Stools music with all the odd time signatures and oh, it's more America than America. So if you guys have not watched Waiting for Guffman, why are you watching this channel? You won't get any of my jokes, but all the little details are just perfect of that movie, and especially the music, which is underappreciated. Hey, Fred. Let's see. Here's the question that almost caused me to miss coming back after the last intermission. Zapruder Pedro, if I want to run 12-volt DC heaters using a Recom SMPS with heater DC elevation, can I ground the DC side of the SMPS to my heater elevation DC voltage? I don't know off the top of my head. In general, I would expect to probably need to float one of those ground references. And I'm not sure why you would need to have an elevated DC reference for, say, your output tubes if you have a full DC heater supply for your preamp tubes. But I don't know how many preamp tubes you have, how many of them are going to get the DC full DC versus some which may get just a reference to a DC elevation. You rarely will need an elevated DC reference just for the output tubes, because the output tubes and the phase inverter tube, if you're using a long-tail pair Schmidt inverter, which most amps do, are by nature humbucking. So any noise which is common to both signals, both sides, both the input and the output of the phase inverter, which includes the inputs of the output tubes, those are going to be noise canceling. The only thing in common they could have would be noise. So if you have heater noise, it goes away magically. It's great. The elevation is for the cathode follower. Okay. You have to be careful with doing too much of an elevation on cathode followers, by the way, but we're going to ignore that point. I don't know how many preamp tubes you have ahead of your cathode follower, but I would try to do your design so that, say if you're doing a Marshall style thing with 1 or 2 preamp tubes, so 2 to 4 triodes, and then a cathode follower, which would have a prep stage. So a cathode follower is a 2 triode setup, one to drive it, one to do the actual cathode follower, and then a phase inverter and output tubes. I would have the cathode follower and the 2 to 4 triodes ahead of it all on the DC supply, which means you need to look at the current capability. If you do need to have a DC elevated reference as well as DC heaters, I would need to read a bunch of data sheets and do some testing in SPICE for myself before I said, yes, you can, or no, you cannot. I know that Jason Tong from Headfirst Amps put up a video earlier this week, I believe, talking about how to easily get a 12-volt supply in your amp with some off-the-shelf components and a little board he's got. But I confess, Jason, I have not had the time to watch your video other than to notice that it exists, and it's probably a very good thing. So do check out Headfirst Amps and Jason Tong's. Okay, this question is based on Jason's video. Well, Jason's a great guy, and he's dealing with this a lot. You can get in touch. You can get in touch with Jason. He'll probably have a better answer than I have off the top of my head sitting here. And Brad's saying the elevation is also to eliminate heater cathode capacitive coupling leakage in stages other than the cathode follower solely for heater hum noise rejection. Yeah, but you can use DC heaters on the cathode follower tube as well. So if you can, I don't know how many triodes are ahead of in your amp. If it's just 2 triodes for the preamp and then a triode where the 2 channels are mixed, and that triode feeds the cathode follower triode, so you've got a total of 4 triodes, you could probably find a SMPS Recom thing that'll have current for 2 12AX7s and be just fine. I would just do that for the 2 12AX7s and then have the other 12AX7 for your phase inverter, and anything after that, the EL34s or whatever. So 4 triodes and cathode follower. Okay, well, you can probably still find a supply that'll do 3 12AX7s. If not, I have had issues in Marshalls with the first triode of a cathode follower stage needing some kind of DC elevation or a DC supply. But I don't know what the Recom stuff is. See if you can reach out to Jason with this question, because he's going to be. I don't use an IRF 820 instead of the tube. They work for a while and they get hot and they don't last as long. It's not like tubes last that long, but tubes are literally socketed, whereas IRF 80s, 820s are hard to socket. But there's got to be some way, even if you need to elevate some stuff and then have full DC for the other, to isolate, to do a floating ground for one of them. But beyond that, I don't have a whiteboard here. I don't have any charts. I don't have any spec sheets, so I can't tell you more than that here. I'd rather give you a good old honest, I don't know, than tell you, oh yeah, totally, do this thing, it'd be great, because some guy on the internet didn't want to admit that he didn't know the actual answer. I'd just be some other guy on the internet tell you bullshit if that were the case. But it is interesting to me how many variables. If I do this, then I do that, and then I got to hold my mouth just right. Brad elevates using the cathode tubes, power tube cathodes, and a cathode bias amp. Yeah, I do that as well. Use an HT voltage divider and fixed bias amps. Yeah, I do the same thing, but I usually don't do. I either have an amp where I'm doing DC heaters, or I'm doing a DC elevation. I have not combined them in one amp yet, so you have to make sure that your wonderful circuit doesn't go poof in a cloud of sneaky smoke because you've got the grounds done wrong. Let's see. Heat sink the phone. I wish I could. I looked into some of those phone coolers that they sell, and those all go on the back, most of which use the MagSafe thing, but then I could not attach it to the holder on the dash. So what I've come up with as a workaround for that is if I take the phone out of the case and put that on the dash mount thing and position that so it sees out the windshield, but then I have one of the air conditioning vents aimed straight up at it. That keeps the phone a lot cooler. And then I have a lav mic plugged in, so you don't. Pardon me. I've been swallowing for 54 years. You'd think I get better at it by now. Don't go there. That'd be gross, and that's low hanging fruit. And don't go there either. But and deep, and is deep too. I think that might do the job if I have the lav mic, so you don't hear the fan noise because the phone mic wouldn't be picking that up. But first, I've got to wait to see if Verizon magically fixes the Wi-Fi in my area. So all this stuff may work much better soon. We are going to get to Mad Jack's comment in just a minute. We're going to take the. Yeah, that's Mad Jack's is a good one to come back to because it makes me feel good about myself. It's always nice to feel good about oneself, don't you think? And I'm going to go do some stuff during the next 7-minute intermission so that I will also feel good about myself, all about myself. I hope you guys use this time wisely and productively. All right, the last hour starts. I'm gonna have to see if I can speed through some of these. See if I can get some. Thank you very much, Mad Jack F. Said very kind things. I'm gonna try to get to the questions. Andy66 been trying to live stream hard with the phone, saving for a camera, but it's going to be a while. Well, if you're doing stationary live streams from home, if you've got good internet connection, you can live stream with a phone. But phones make it harder than it has to be. Gas, Memphis is a bucket list visit. Well, that's one of the reasons I want to do the tour. For those who cannot come, it'll give you a taste of what's here, and those who want to come, it'll give you better suggestions than just Graceland and Beale Street. And there's nothing wrong with going to Graceland. And you can go to Beale Street if you want to, but there's so much better stuff to do here. Mr. E-Train, I'm using a cable plugged in. The mag does get hotter and is slower. Hey, Jeff Motter, AC15C1 and AC15C1X. See my videos on that model about suggested mods. They're mods I do, and they're mods that are less intrusive, that still are good, but worthwhile doing, that almost any tech can do pretty easily, that I mentioned in those videos. But the amp, as it comes from the factory, is quite good. You might want to put some better tubes in it. So I would get one. Nothing wrong with getting the one with the greenback and getting some good tubes in it, because the tubes they ship with are kind of cheap. Sometimes one or two of them are worth having, but a lot of generic tubes that have been shipped many thousands of miles and dropped off pallets and stuff. So get a set of JJs. What microphone do I like for mic and guitar amp other than SM57? Most of the stuff you've been hearing for the last year is the Royer R10 Hot Rod, though that's about a $600 mic. And I can get very similar results in some ways with just a 57. Also like the 421 a lot. There are a lot of mics I really like on guitar amps. This one would be fantastic. This SE 4100 large diaphragm condenser. I could get great results with that little SE8 small diaphragm condenser, depending on how you approach the beast. I find that for what I do, where I'm trying to just represent what the amp sounds like in the room, the Royer R10 is just a cheat code. It's just put it kind of near the speaker and press record and it's done. Perfect. 57 is, you have to play around with the placement, but I could do an entire album of very good, very different guitar sounds with just an SM57. The main thing about an SM57 is you got to spend about 3 weeks learning how to position the microphone for different effects with an amplifier. You have to know the amplifier really well, and you have to know the speaker real well. You have to learn how to listen in the room, and volume, when the volume allows, to be able to move your head around down where the mic is, because we tend not to listen to amplifiers with our ear an inch away from the speaker, yet we expect the microphone to be there and to sound like what we hear 10 feet away. I'm 6'2", so my ears are what, 5'10" off the floor? It's a very different position. But if you put an SM57 where your ears are in the room, you're just going to hear a whole bunch of room sound. It's going to be awful. So you get some good quality headphones, and there are, let's see, sorry, the very good quality headphones were wrapped around the very good quality desk leg. They still are. Come on, what's going on with you? Come on. Give me my headphones back. Well, I'll sort that out. Good quality headphones really help. And I've got some that are sold for drummers that block out everything by about 60 dB, but inside the elements are those of the Sony, whose name escapes me right now, the Sonys everyone uses, anyway, the 7506s or whatever. And so you put those on, you kind of don't hear the amp in front of you, but you hear what the mic sounds like. You got to just play around with it. All right, if I start dead center, let's just go an inch at a time. Okay. Now let's move back an inch, repeat the same process. Move back another inch, repeat the same process. Now let's try the whole thing again at different angles. And you've got to put in the time to get the results, unless you just get very lucky. And you may get very lucky and just get a fantastic sound without doing any of that. But what microphone do I like for my kind of guitar amp? I like having a microphone that works and the experience to know how to position it. And I will say that, having said that, when I had that, I don't remember if it was Sennheiser E609 or E906 that I tried, it's on the channel. It was a lot more work to find usable sounds, and there are a lot less, there are many fewer usable sounds in that mic. That mic had a sonic footprint that worked against the sound of the amplifier in the room, to me. Let's see. Sorry. Oh, my self-congratulations was self-mockery more than anything else, People talking about picks. And I agree with some of you, and I disagree with some of you, but we're going to skip ahead to the next questions about amps and stuff. Oh, yeah, you need to get an acoustic guitar, dude. It's an entirely different experience, and it's very rewarding, and your neighbors generally appreciate it so much more. Joe Rinaldi likes the 0.8 ice pick, the black ice. I've got the 0.8 here. I got the 1.1 and the 1.5. Of these three, I like the 1.1 the most. The 1.5 can be a bit dark, even on like a Telecaster, and it's the one that wants to rotate the most in my hand. But Jeff McElrain gets great results with the 1.5, as does John Cordy. So at some point, I've got to realize that it's probably just because those two guys are much better players than I am. Let's Ghost. I noticed the black panel Champ has a bypass cap on V1B. Yes, it does. Pros, cons of adding one to a V1B on a Tweed Champ. You'll get more gain. You can try it, see if you like it. Remember, the other difference between those two amps is the Tweed Champ has no negative feedback. Therefore, the amp already has more gain, whereas the black era has negative feedback, hence the preamp has less gain. So the real answer is they're probably already pretty equivalent. And if you add the bypass to V1B on a Tweed, you may get more gain than you want. Or you may say, that's it. That's the sound I've always wanted to have. You can also add negative feedback to your Tweed if you wanted to. You can put it on a switch. It can be a little bit tricky. You've got to do some tricks to the cathode arrangement so bad things don't happen. But Rob Robinette has got all that kind of stuff on how to do that, well documented on his site, robrobinette.com. Yeah, Brian Sutton uses tons of picks, and I'm not comparing myself to Brian Sutton, but I've got easily more than a dozen different picks here on my desk. But the ones I use the most are just about 4. For acoustic, I just love the Blue Chip. Sonny Silversmith says, I skipped you because you heart Trump. Well, I forgive you for that. Maybe you hang around with leftos freaks like me, you'll chill a little bit. And I see. Here's why I skipped you, Sonny. I saw this question twice. The first time you deleted it from the chat, and I thought you would delete it because you wanted it deleted, and then you asked it again, and it was not deleted from the chat. Can you Silverface Super Reverb repair tutorials again more in depth and how to get the correct schematic and color layout? Well, I will do repair tutorials as I have Silverface Super Reverbs come in. Next one comes in, there'll be a video on it, and that's where you'll get that. How to get the correct schematic and color layout. I'm not sure what you mean by color layout, though most of the schematics do show the wiring layout, oftentimes with the colors identified. But the correct schematics used to be you could go to ampwares.com. Now most of the stuff you need to go to thetubestore.com and go to their resources, amp schematics, Fender, and for the Silverface stuff, it'll be they have 3. They have the old recent and the middle stuff, and the silver face stuff is in the middle. You got to find the model that you have. That's where the best online resource that I found for Fender schematics is. Mojotone has some, but they bought Ampwares, and the transition from Ampwares to Mojotone has been very spotty. And I do have a message to guitar players with alcohol problems at gigs and after. Yeah, seek help. Same I give to anyone who has an alcohol problem, not just a musician. I ended my last driving stream by stopping at a pub and having a pint. So maybe I'm not the best example, but I I drove, and then I stopped, and I had I had 2 pints, and then I very safely, I was fine after 2 pints. I drove 3 blocks to my house, but that's all I did. And if I'd had more than 2 pints, I would have walked to my house and come back and got the car the next day. But I would not have had the second pint if I was about to go on stage, because I know how my coordination works and doesn't. Yeah, Bottom Kitchen, you need to get yourself a good acoustic. T777 likes the dark sounding green Tortex, the .88s. That's funny. I think these sound very bright. They're going to sound dark in comparison to like a .5 or .6 or .73, but there's some guy living kind of sort of close to me who's built a Tweed 57 Deluxe, working player 53 says, saying he's built over 20 of them now. Therefore, he believes he's the best at replicating them. My thoughts. Bless his heart. And those of you from the South know exactly what I mean by that. That's really cute that he thinks he's built 20 of something and he's the best. Thanks, Padre Blue 11. Appreciate that. Let's see. Talking about their nails, people getting their nails did. Most rock journalism is people who can't write, interview people who can't play for people who can't read. Frank Zappa. There you go. I've got a weak index nail on my right hand, so. Is there any can't go wrong speaker that I could put into a cab? I don't have much experience myself, but figure I had some options. Well, Sonny, I try. It depends on what you want the sound to be. So can't go wrong speakers. For most amps, a can't go wrong speaker, let's just say in terms of general purpose usage, general purpose wattage that can handle most amps under 100 watts for a 1x12, if that you're talking about. ET65 by WGS, the Celestion Vintage 30, the Warehouse Veteran 30, the Celestion, did I already say Veteran 30? Yeah, I did. I'm trying to think of wattage because I don't want to stick a greenback in something that's going to fry it. Maybe a 50-watt version of a G12H30 that are out there. It's hard to know without knowing the wattage, what the musical needs are. Maybe the answer is like a Eminence Ramrod or Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing's actually a pretty damn good speaker for general purpose stuff. Or the Red, White, and Blues if you don't need it to be too bright, and by which I mean it's kind of on the dark side. But yeah, Veteran 30, Vintage 30, ET65. Oh, I remember the other Celestion I meant to mention. The Creamback 65 would be another good general purpose. If an amp sounds bad with any of those speakers, there's something wrong with the amp. Even if none of those speakers are ideal for any particular player, any player who can play is going to be very happy with the sound coming out of that. Magic Man, I see your suggestion for Weber, and Weber's got some really great speakers, but they're very specific in general. So like a 12F150 might be great for some styles, but just fall apart under heavy distortion. Same way I would not recommend. First of all, I would not recommend a Celestion GT75 to anyone I liked, or to anyone who would be playing where someone I liked could possibly be subjected to the sound coming from that speaker. But it would be especially bad in an amp where you really want a Weber 12F150. So. Directly out of the wall would generate even less noise in general. Well, it depends on what else is on that circuit. Because if you have a laser printer on the same circuit in the house, if you have a refrigerator or ice maker compressor on that same circuit, you can get noise on that circuit. If you have a dimmer switch on a stand lamp in the other room, but it's on the same circuit, you're going to have noise from that crap, and it'll pollute the AC coming to your house. That's all true, and that can all be handled with very inexpensive capacitors. Where I have a problem with the industry is they say, okay, all the miles and miles and miles of cable from the local power station to your house, and none of that matters, but we're going to sell you an 8-foot long power cable about the size of my arm to go from the receptacle on your wall to your amp for $400, the low price of $400, and that magically makes everything better. That's not how any of this works. Nelson P. asks, Marshall DSL 20C, avoid. 2525 Jubilee, the new ones, avoid. Versus Friedman Runt or JJ Jr., which is best and why? Either the Runt or the JJ Jr., because they sound different, and one of them is going to be one that you really like the sound of. One of them you're like, oh, that's good, but that's not the one I like. DSL 20C is a piss poor design with a marketing EL34s. And the 2525 is a $400 amp being sold for much more than that. It's just, are they taking the piss? Because, the Runt and the JJ in the same price range are infinitely better amps. But it depends on which one gives you the sound you want. Need 2 channels, Foo Fighters and Pearl Jam covers. Well, I think I'm not as familiar with the clean options on the JJ, but I know on the Runt, the larger Runts have got a clean channel and a dirty channel. I think there's just the one channel on the Runt, but the thing is, you can always roll your volume down, and on a Friedman Runt 20, you turn it down, it'll clean up. And if you listen to a lot of the stuff, at least off Versus and 10, which are the albums I'm most familiar with from Pearl Jam. Like, if you wanted to get the sound of Black, a lot of that sounds like a Les Paul with a volume rolled down into a JCM 800, and then later when he does the volume swell, he was just turning the volume up on the guitar and Jean and what's this? Tell me what. If you want to have that on one channel and then a kind of thin sounding Strat into a Bassman on the other channel, there you go. And I'm not making fun of those records. I love those records, but a lot of the clean sounds on that are a Les Paul with the volume turned down into a semi-dirty JCM 800. And yeah, you can always set the amp to be kind of dirty, then cleans up as you roll your volume down a little bit, and use pedals for more than that. Remember, a lot of the stuff on the Foo Fighters records are more Richard Nixon than Eddie Vedder, sadly. A lot of stuff on the Foo Fighter records were AC30s, cranked really freaking loud. And live, he replicates that with a Marshall, sometimes with a pedal, sometimes just turning the amp up. But he's got a much larger stage with, and he controls the sound levels. He doesn't have to please a bar owner. don't get the DSL-20. I'm sorry, working player. The DSL-20 is just, there's so many better amps out there than a DSL-20. I'll tell you what, honestly, if someone said, hey, you need an amp that can do Pearl Jam and Foo Fighters for much less than the price of any of the amps you mentioned, I get a AC-15 C1 with the greenback and 1 or 2 overdrive pedals. If you want to do the McCready thing, get a wah. But that will do the sound. If I had one here, I'd show you right now. But yeah, you can do yellow Ledbetter, you can do black, you can do all those tones. You could do, let's see, I can't think of any Pearl Jam song you couldn't do with that rig. Just a wah, basic delay, if you want to, an overdrive pedal, maybe 2 overdrive pedals if you're feeling saucy. An AC-15 C1 will absolutely give you all the sounds of Versus and 10 if you can play those parts. I'm not a big fan of the old OCD pedal. I always thought they had a fizzy diode thing to my ear, much like a Distortion Plus, and that's a cool thing for certain things. But I thought they were way overrated, and I had one of the first ones. Well, the full tone pedal I thought was the best one they ever did. The 2. The Soul Bender was great when the humidity allowed, because it had a really nice germanium transistor that was very temperamental. But when the weather was kind, it sounded godlike. And the version of the Full Drive 2 with a comp switch where it took the clipping diodes out, so you're just giving a great big boost, and it really raunches up an amp nicely. In fact, that an old full tone Full Drive 2 with the comp cut switch into an AC-15 with almost any good guitar is kind of, if you can't get Pearl Jam out of that, is not the rig. Let's see. Hey, David Martin, just bought a 63 Pro, no reverb, 15-inch speaker, $1,200. This is a good price. The cabinet is replaced. I don't know. I don't keep up with the. I'm sorry. I don't keep up with the vintage market. It sounds like it's probably a pretty good price. I'll say this: if you were to ask me to build you that same amp today, with speaker, with tubes, with chassis, and all that, that'd easily be a $3,000 amp to build. So I think you're well ahead of the game, even aside from is it worth it in terms of collectors go. It's a $3,000 amp to build a new one, at least. So. Hey, Mr. West, his friend and he went to Colleen Fazio's chant building class Thursday through Friday. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, that's why I didn't call you, because I knew you were busy this week. Hope you said hi to Colleen from me. I think highly of her. I don't watch a lot of her videos because I don't watch a lot of amp videos, because I'm by the time I'm putting out my own amp videos, I'm sick of looking and thinking about amps. But she's doing good work, and I'm glad you had a lot of fun, and I will call you and find out more about it. Thank you for paying attention there, Wes. I knew I could count on you. Boba survived, though. Well, Gast, that's if you take the Boba Fett, whatever the fuck that was, a couple years ago on Disney, seriously. In my world, he died. So basically, Star Wars died long before the prequels came out, long before the sequels came out. Star Wars died when the special editions came out. Here's the thing. Han did not shoot first. Han was the only motherfucker who shot. That's the entire point. Hey, Carlos. Thank you very much. Fender Twin Reverb can use 5881 or even 6P3S. They have different voltage application, but a lot of people say they use those new old stock tubes in their military. Well, like I said earlier in the chat, it depends on, hey, RJ, it depends on the vendor. So if you buy those tubes from a really good vendor, great, go for it. Don't buy them off eBay. Don't buy them off Reverb. You know, give yourself some protection because a lot of those new old stock tubes are just old tubes. And the new old stock supply has been so rummaged through over the past 25 years that a lot of the stuff that's being sold today for very high prices is the stuff that could not be sold 20 years ago because it's got a rattle to it. So, literary questions, one of my favorite kind of questions. Any good novels I would recommend that take place in Memphis or the surrounding area? Like many librarians, I'm working on my summer reading list now. Well, you're in luck. First of all, you can go to an awful lot of John Grisham novels if you like such things. There's the Firm, and there's the Pelican Brief, and the most important one, whose name escapes me, the Courthouse Drama. Anyway, those are all set in and around Memphis, back when John Grisham was writing novels as opposed to just drafts or screenplays. He writes an outline, they make a movie, he makes money. But those were quite entertaining novels. A Time to Kill, that's the one I'm thinking of. Then there's Peter, can't remember his last name, Peter something. A Summons to Memphis is a fantastic book, specifically about Memphis in the 30s, moving to Memphis from the country in the 30s, and how Americans' lives were changing with electrification and automobiles and everything. Peter Taylor. He wrote The Old Forest and A Summons to Memphis. I highly recommend both of them. And everything Faulkner did, and Faulkner to me is the great American novelist, was set between Memphis and Oxford, Mississippi. He called it Yaxapatama County, not Oxford, but it's Oxford, Mississippi. And some of his stuff was set here, or Memphis appears in it, because Memphis is the cultural capital of North Mississippi. If you lived in Oxford and you wanted to go to the city, you did not go to Jackson, you went to Memphis. So, I don't think, if you're a librarian, I don't need to tell you any more than just read all the Faulkner you can. I highly recommend the Peter Taylor and the Faulkner over the John Grisham, but the John Grisham is worth mentioning. And to know more about our world, not specifically Memphis, but this world, I highly recommend reading Eudora Welty, and highly recommend Maya Angelou, and what's the other wonderful woman whose name escapes me? It's tough when I don't know there's going to be a test, and names that I have and words that I have all the time, the rest of the time on these streams just disappear. Eudora Welty, and it'll come to me. It'll just come to me later. Sorry, but that's I like Alice Walker, but no, older than Alice Walker, and I just can't remember her name right now. We get some other questions, and if her name occurs to me, I'll pop it in here, because that's how my brain works these days. It's just like process running. Well, I will include Flannery. Flannery O'Connor is not who I was thinking of, but I certainly include her in that list of how to understand this part of the world. I don't like and I'm not singling anyone out, and I'm not going to put the comments in here. I don't like watching a bunch of middle-aged men comment on Colleen's videos because they always talk about her looks or whatever. And she is a really accomplished young woman who's a very good tech, and she's presenting the same information I'm presenting. And I think to reduce her to her looks is kind of gross and depressing. Depressing on behalf of the guys who say that stuff. Just take her seriously. She's a professional. And if you think you've got a shot with a girl because you catcall her in YouTube comments, no, son. But I don't view her as pretty good for a girl. She's a really good tech, and she should be treated that way. And I mean, you guys don't even ever mention how ruggedly handsome I am, and I'm just deeply offended. Look at that jawline. And I'm not trying to make anyone here feel bad. And I did not put any particular names up on the screen. But I would just like that shit to stop if I had control of Judgment Day. Let's see, trying to find the next question. I think I'm at the last intermission now. All of Faulkner, Mr. E-Train. I'm particularly fond of Absalom. Wes, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. Hey, possible reasons my Silver Sky is microphonic in the middle position at full volume. Picks on pick guard, spike throughout. You could have a bad solder joint. You could have loose coils. Could just not be potted. So I would contact PRS and see if they would send you a replacement for that middle pickup. Pardon me. Either that or you gotta, if the pickup's working and it measures good, you can take it and have it dipped in wax. But I defy anyone to match the strange and delightful harmonies, chord changes, and timing of the American Beauty and Working Man's Dead records. It'd drive Rick Beato crazy, but the damage would do him good. Well, I think Rick needs to protect his relative pitch and should avoid those delightful harmonies as much as possible. Sorry, I can't support the Dead. It's like being in a rehearsal space, hearing three bands practicing at once in different rooms. Especially since the Allman Brothers exist, and you have the choice between the Dead, the Allman Brothers, and Little Feat. The Dead are not even in that conversation. I'm sorry, they're just not there. Garcia could be. Garcia, when he's playing with Grisman, totally different thing. So when Jerry Garcia played with fellow musicians, it was phenomenal. And then he also played with the Dead. Let's see. So I'm at the end of I'm at the beginning of the last intermission. We've got about 17 minutes left, and I'm going to try to get any remaining questions before we get to the end. Hey, Martin Reed. Well, that's got 3 question marks, but it's not a question. It's a statement. Hey, if a compressor pedal works for you, that's great. I just find that the best compressor before a speaker is the amplifier itself, and a really good amplifier, A, will compress. B, if you have a compressor ahead of the amplifier cannot react to the pickups the right way, so you're making your amp more generic because you're not giving it anything to work with. I use compression in the recordings here, but that's the trick. My compressor's on the signal coming from the microphone. You know, but hey, it takes all kinds of flavors. So if you want to use a Keeley 2-knob compressor and it makes you happy, that's great. Just don't play any Grateful Dead or I'll have to disown you. Yeah, we don't have many roundabouts. I know about 3 or 4 roundabouts in town, and that one down by the bridges, down by the river the other day, that's a new one that I only discovered that morning, so that was fun. But roundabouts are much more common in New England and for some reason in Ohio. He Came from Memphis is a good book. A better book is Soulsville, USA, about the Stax Volt scene and impact. But It Came from Memphis is quite good as well. Let's see. Yeah, I've never been to Graceland. I have no interest in going to Graceland. Sun Records is great, and almost everyone who works there, who does the tours, they're musicians, and they love it. And the entire staff are musicians pretty much, and they're very supportive of each other. It's a very nice scene, and when all the tourists leave, they actually do sessions there. My buddy uses my podcast to fall asleep to. John listens to Greg's Airplanes and Automobiles. Am I Greg's ANA too? Because my voice sounds just like his. I have never heard of Greg's Airplanes and Automobiles. I'll have to check out Greg's ANA, but that is not me. And I hope your buddy is intending to use my podcast to fall asleep to and not putting on while driving. Yeah, it reminds me of the joke. I want to die like my grandfather, peacefully in his sleep, not screaming like all his passengers. Yeah, roundabouts generally are safer, with the exception of the one around the Arc de Triomphe, which is mostly unsafe because American tourists are stupid enough to rent a car and try to drive around it. Hey, Eric Blaha, do I recommend getting a reissue Princeton and having a tech do my upgrades, or a 71 through 75 Princeton reverb? It depends on the condition of the 71 to 75 and what the price difference is. Um, I think you can still get a reissue and have it modded for quite a bit less than a 7175 will cost. Plus, it's probably going to need some service. I do think the 71 through 75 Princeton has the potential to be the better amp, but it also has the potential to have more immediate issues that need to be addressed. Either way, at the end of the day, whether you have those upgrades I suggest and the amp is in good shape, or whether you get a 71 set through 75, make sure it has a good speaker, make sure it's in good condition. You're going to have amps which sound very similar, and if you treat them well, will last equally long. It's just the 71 through 75. There are aspects of it which are higher quality with more inherent longevity. Oh, you think roundabouts are a fun experiment for Americans? Union Avenue, which I don't think I took you guys on, is one of the old central east-west commercial veins of Memphis, and for a long time it would be like 6 lanes, but the middle lane, or 7 lane, 5 or 7 lanes. So the middle lane between certain hour of the days would be eastbound only. Other hours of the day would be westbound only, and they would have special lights over that lane that would either give a red X in one direction and a green arrow in the other direction, or vice versa. And there would be a time period where they would flash yellow while you knew no one should be in that lane while they make the transition. And so people would move to this town never having experienced this thing where, hey, I was here yesterday. I was going this way. I could turn left out of here. They try it again. They get in that lane. They're in oncoming traffic. And then the Memphians decide, well, that really isn't that bright an idea. We have had a lot of wrecks. So let's change that out. So they got rid of that system. And then that lane became just one way or the other. I don't remember which one. And then people who are used to being able to drive that direction in the morning, but not in the afternoon, would still drive that direction in the morning and be in oncoming traffic. And all the people who did this, well, they're all dead now. So the remaining people here all figured that out. So it's like when you run over a squirrel in your car, you feel bad, and you want to make sure that there's nothing hurt your paint job, but you feel bad. But at the same time, that next generation of squirrels will be that much smarter and that much more agile. And that's how Lyle got canceled, for promoting squirrel cruelty. Fortunately, very, very deep into a thread, into a chat. We have traffic lights that switch if no one is waiting. Well, we have traffic lights that people ignore when no one's waiting. We have traffic lights that people just ignore, period. But I tend to know where those roads are and not go there. EL34 World has a great schematic section. I always forget about that. Yeah, they do. I can't play if I'm sober, and I can't play if I've been drinking, so I'm just fucked out of the way. You couldn't drive after 2 pints in the UK, you'd be over the limit. Well, unless their limit's extremely low. I've had 2 UK pints. It would take a third before I'd be like, yeah, I'll walk. Of course, when I was in the UK, I did not have a car. I was walking everywhere anyway, so I could have as much as I wanted. The only time on any of my trips where I had a little bit too much was when I was in Vienna, and she asked if I wanted the small or the large beer, and I ordered the large because I thought the small might be a half pint, and her English was not great, and my German is horrible, and it was that mega Stein that you saw in that picture, this tall, this wide, and I downed it, but again, didn't have a car. I was walking everywhere, so it was a fun walk over to the Albertina Modern after that. And considering all the bullshit modern and contemporary art in that museum, I was glad I was a little bit buzzed. There's the only way I could possibly get through that. So anyway, once I saw what it was, just a whole bunch of pretentious bullshit installations, I'm like, Nikki, you have fun. I'm gonna go outside and wait for you. It's a beautiful day, and I don't want to. I say the thing is, she likes contemporary art, and I loathe it. So I don't want to be a drag on her. So I'm like, sweetheart, you love this. You go love this, because if I go with you and you ask me what I think and I tell you, it ruins everyone's day. I'm going to go outside and enjoy the sunshine. You enjoy that collage done by a kindergartner that's worth $10,000 or more these days. So I think art died about 1950, somewhere around about there. And I'm not promoting that anyone should drink a bunch of pints and then drive. I know I was under the limit, and I only drove 3 blocks. Brad, I think you should annoy everyone by posting PSAs every 5 minutes. I think it'd be great if everyone was angry at you instead of me. It'd be great. Let's see. For spending a long weekend in Memphis, any decent budget hotels I'd recommend? I think probably be better off, by and large, with Airbnb, because the hotels in Memphis, they're the traditional budget hotels that are kind of sketchy, always by the interstate, and then there are hotels which cater to families who travel, and hotels which cater to people who are here for business with business expense accounts. So I think for the money, you'd probably be better off finding an Airbnb, and there are a lot of really nice Airbnbs in these neighborhoods around here. But I don't know any hotels I necessarily recommend because I don't stay in hotels in Memphis. The only time I've stayed in a hotel in Memphis, and I think ever, is when we had a big ice storm about 4 years ago, and I took Nikki to one out by where my mom lives, because they had power out there, and the dog went to my mom's house, and Nikki and I went to a hotel out there. But I wouldn't recommend to anyone coming to Memphis to stay in Cordova because it would take you 40 minutes to get anywhere that you wanted to go. Yeah, maybe I should add a PSA right as each break ends. So it does the 7 minute countdown, then transitions to something where it just says, "Hey, stupid. Hey, you. Only say blah 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 blah. Only ask once. Blah blah blah." Not stupid, except for you. You there in the back. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But maybe I'll automate that. It's not a bad idea, just so people know. I could do one at the beginning of each section, one at the beginning of the chat in general, one as I come back from each break. For instance, Eric Blaha just asked a variation on the same Princeton question that I already answered. And that's not singling you out, Eric. I need to be more clear on how I give instructions. Um, it's tricky doing this, but if someone said, "Hey, you need a Princeton," I'd probably either buy the Fender reissue and do a few tweaks to it, or buy the Mojotone. The Mojotone's selling assembled kits now, but I'm in a unique position where I could get the Mojotone, have them do 90% of the work, and then go in there and fix the mistakes and make it perfect. Um, I'm kind of the wrong person to ask these questions because I'm comparing them to like the best examples of what Fender actually made, say in 1964. Have I come across a Z-Rec Junior? I have not had either the junior or the non-junior in, Victor. I've played one and I've heard them and they're nice sounding, but I've not been inside one. When adding a screen grid resistor in a 5E3 clone build, what wattage is preferred? Well, number one, the screen grid is kind of built into the resistor, which serves as a choke in that amp that's between the HT and the screen node. So a lot of the current is already built into that resistor. But if you want to have individual screen grid resistors in a 5E3 clone build, well, I'm tempted to say look up the data sheet of the tube type and the voltages and do the math. But I'll be kind and say just use some 5 watts because there's room and it won't hurt. There's room to put them in there because there's a good amount of space over the sockets. And it's easy to do. So just get some little 5 watts and use some of this little Vishay AC or PAC series that Brad and I like because they're low mass. But you probably could get away with 3 watts if you needed to. So just some 470 ohms or 270 ohms would be fine because majority of the resistance is already coming from the resistor taking the place of the choke. You just want a little individual protection. 270, 470 ohm will be fine. Thank you, RJ. I appreciate you being here, man. RJ's a cool guy. Well, I'll say, Luke, I am not your father. That's not the line, Joe. Oh, working player. I'm not trying to single you out, man. If I have, I I just have to be. I just have to. You know, there are well-intentioned misconceptions, and I'm sure in other fields I have my own, but in this particular aspect of life, I gotta call the balls and I gotta call the strikes. Yeah, Wes, I want to find a way to download 4K 77 just so I can watch it. It's not just despecialized working player. It's the closest thing that you're gonna find to what it would have been like if you saw a absolutely perfect new print in 1977. I saw it in the theaters in '77, but I was watching it in Jonesboro, Arkansas. So who knows how many generations my print was from the original? And I'm pretty sure the Malco Theater in Jonesboro, Arkansas, in 1977, did not have the latest and greatest in projectors or lenses or cleaning or what condition the screen was in. All I know is it was the coolest thing I ever saw in my life, and I was 6 years old. And every emotional aspect of that film is stuck with me ever since. And if you've never, unless you were seeing it at that age of that time, you cannot understand the impact it has. It had that when it starts, the biggest spaceship you've ever seen in your life flies over your head from behind you, over your head. And for the first time, you're hearing sound coming from behind you, and it's loud and it's beautiful and it all looks real. And all of a sudden, the biggest spaceship you've ever seen, bigger than any spaceship you ever even imagined from watching footage of NASA or watching Buck Rogers or anything, flies over your head. And then you see that it's the biggest spaceship you ever saw in your life is actually a tiny spaceship being chased by the legit biggest spaceship you ever saw in your life. And they're firing lasers at each other. And it's so real because you can't see any strings. You can't see matting. It's just, it was mind blowing. It's like the entire world opened the door from black and white Kansas into full color Technicolor Oz. Anyway, we're at the top of our last hour. I'm gonna try to catch a few last minute questions so that people don't feel left out. Any experience working on diesel amps? No, but I've heard bad things from other techs. Or Bogner, thoughts on quality? Some Bogners are quite good. Some Bogners are really terrible, like the Alchemist. Avoid. The Shiva can be good, has some issues, can be prone to tube eating, has some issues with low voltage supply in many of them. And they've got some other models I've not tried. So I cannot give you a blanket yay, nay on the entire brand for Bogner, though I've not enjoyed the sound, particularly of any Bogner that's come in. But I can definitely tell you to avoid the diesels. I've actually have had one diesel that I was asked to fix and I could not because the thing was just charred on the inside because of a poor layout with traces. I have no knowledge of TSCA compliance when it comes to AC15C1s. I would hope that the newer ones weigh less, but I have no idea what the differences are other than that. Where was the last question? All right, here we go. I've got an Egnator Tweaker 15 combo that sounds great. Good. The OEM power tubes were cooked. Okay. I replaced it with electroharmonics and it fried those. How to fix this? Well, you need to see what's going on. And if the old tubes died and you replaced it and it fried it, you probably have a failure condition in the amp. Either something failed and took out your original tubes that were cooked, or your original tubes failed and took out a component. And so until that component is replaced, it's going to fry whatever other tubes you put in there. I'd have to see inside your specific amp to give you more information than that. But probably it's going to be something related to where the output tubes are. In general, when you have things like that, it's going to be a bad filter cap. Not that common, but it could be. More likely a failed screen grid resistor or some issue in the bias supply. These are the things that techs look for first. They're easy to find. They're usually easy to fix. But don't feed that amp new tubes until you get that resolved. Because if it's got a systemic failure, it'll just kill whatever tube you put in there. But if you want to sell it, I would suggest see if you can get it fixed first, because it's probably pretty easy to have it fixed, at which point you could sell it for a lot more than if you sell it non-working. If you sell it non-working, no one's going to buy it, even if the fix is $47. So. Thanks, Steve. I do occasionally work on solid-state amps, just not very commonly. I specialize in tube amps because there are fewer people today who can work on tube technology, and almost anyone with a background in electronics can work on solid-state amplifiers because there are variations in what they see in other things, and the voltages and the currents are much lower with solid-state devices typically than with tube stuff. But occasionally I get solid-state stuff in. Brad gets more than I do, because I don't think Brad is able to say, oh no, take this to this other guy across town who specializes in this. But I have done and will continue to do occasionally solid-state amps. What tube would I recommend for V2 on a vintage 65 Deluxe Reverb? Depends on if you want to spend the money for some new old stock tube, or whether you just want something that's going to work. If you want something that's going to work and work well, I would suggest the Electro Harmonix 7025. Not the 12AX7, the 7025. And get it from a place like the Tube Store or Tube Depot, and get them to sort it out for low noise and microphonics. That way it'll be the most representative of what an old RCA 7025 would have delivered. Big Star Big Star rules is exactly Rich Pedals. Big Star is my life. I need to get another Big Star t-shirt. All right, so I don't think I'm gonna be able to get to everything. I apologize, Pastor. You got a question on impedances, but we're over 3 hours now, and it's not ending on its own accord. So I'm gonna have to put myself out of my misery. Not that this is the farthest thing from misery for me. I love being here to talk to you guys, and it's not because it feeds my ego or anything. It's one of those things where the rest of my life, the rest of my week, if someone says, hey, what do you do? And if I tell them, they go, oh. So this is the time I get to talk about the stuff that interests me with people who are interested in it. And it's just the randomness of the universe that I'm the guy with the microphone and the camera, and you guys are out there typing back at me. But I appreciate you all being here. I hope you all have a good week, and all that kind of stuff. And did I mention how tired I was when I started? I've not gotten less tired, but I think I might be getting better at hiding it. What do you think? Do you have bags in Rash? Vanity, thy name is.